Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. And today I'm very excited to bring you all of my analysis in this Bishop E7 Richter-Rauzer. I've spent a lot of time these past few days and a few months ago, or at least a few weeks ago, I think, preparing this kind of material. I'm trying to make this like the most comprehensive video on the Bishop E7 Richter-Rauzer that is on the internet. I couldn't find much online, but there are a few resources that I will link down below, such as from Jon Victor Gunnarsson, some of the chess books I've used, and all of the resources that are online, like some chessable courses and stuff like that. So without further ado, I'm gonna take my time here and take you through all of the theory that exists in this variation. It's gonna be a lot, and it's gonna be this is gonna be a really long video. I expect this to go for at least 3 hours ish, because there's so much theory. And the last time I tried to record this video, I spent 1 hour and 20 minutes, and even then I felt like I was rushing. So and 1 hour 20 minutes does not even cover like half of what I'm going to be talking about. So this is going to be a long video. Just get your popcorn, get your analysis boards ready, your notes, your Licha studies, all of that good stuff, and let's get right into the theory. So we enter this opening first off from the Richter-Rauzer. Obviously, we all know that, from Bishop G5, and then E6, Queen D2, and Bishop E7. So as I mentioned in the introduction, this is in the introduction video of this series. This is like the move that Boleslavsky used to use exclusively back when he first started using this and like popularized it. So Bishop E7, it's logical. You just develop, you prepare castling, and the problem with this variation, if you can call it a problem, is that you don't get your typical A6 B5 counterplay on the queen side very fast, and so typically you need to play some sort of more defensive way. White's gonna have like the initiative, okay, but theoretically it should hold up. And some notable players that have used this, I've seen Cutronius use this. Vasilius Cutronius, of course, and Kasparov and Kramnik also use this. So with those strong players in mind, I guess I'm hoping that some people start using this variation more often if they believe in my analysis. And so Bishop E7 castles, and Black has two series options here. Queen B6 is no good. It looks logical that you just want to kick this knight. If the knight retreats to B3, then okay. Then it will transpose to one of the variations, I think, after knight b3, and like castles, and then f3 here, and then rook d8. And this will transpose to one of the main variations that we will talk about. But bishop f6 is the problem here. And if we play bishop f6, then after knight c6, bc6, and knight a4, attacking the queen, queen b7, queen takes d6, bishop e7, queen e5, castles, and bishop c4. Black doesn't have enough compensation here, according to Motilev, and the computer agrees. The b file is nothing with the knight on a4 defending it, so this is already very bad. And if we take with the g pawn, then after knight db5 and castles, h4 will come, and rook h3, g3 is a very common idea with this h pawn push, and the d6 pawn is still under attack, and we're in serious trouble here. So queen b6 is no good. Knight takes d4 is an attempt to get out of any serious theory, because we don't want to we just want to get like this position. Try to play a6, for example, try to get b5 quickly, bishop e7, rook c8, maybe queen a maybe bishop e7, rook c8, queen c7, or queen a5, and try to attack with that system. But the problem is that I found after f4 and b5, there's this move bishop f6, which is really annoying. If you take with the bishop, then after e5, d takes e5, and queen e4, attacking this rook, bishop d7, we need to defend this one and not get attacked here. There's this move rook takes d7, which is just winning for white. After king takes d7 and bishop takes b5, we're just busted here. King e7 runs into rook d1 with decisive attack, and after ab5, rook d1 here, and the queen b4 is a nice move to make the king move to the back rank. King e8 takes on e5, and then bishop g5, king b1. This is not good for black. White is going to win the b5 pawn. The pawns on the queen side here are just going to advance. We haven't castled our king. Our coordination is completely messed up, and this is just losing for us. So this variation of playing a6, it's Looks reasonable at first glance, but b5, bishop f6 is the big problem. So we need to go into the main lines here, which happens after castles, and then f4. And I'm going to talk about knight 64, queen 64, and there are these other moves like h6, a6, bishop d7. The lesser of the evils, I think, is like a6, I believe, or was it h6? Yeah, I think it was a6 is like semi-playable, but the main move by far is to play queen a5. And from here, there are a lot of moves. White can play bishop e2, h4, which is very interesting, king b1 just securing the king, or e5 here, or the main move, which is bishop c4. Bishop e2 was recommended by Grandmaster Parimarjan Negi in his book 1e4 versus the Sicilian, the second volume. And we can continue the line after bishop d7. And if bishop takes f6 happens, then we just take back with the bishop. And queen takes d6 cannot be played because of bishop c6. And we get our typical Richter-Rauzer compensation here. This knight is being attacked. This pawn is kind of weak. This pawn is also under pressure if we take on c3. And the queen on d6 will get hit very soon with one of the rooks coming in. So after e5, which is necessary, rook a8, queen a3 is forced, the only move. Queen takes a3, b8, and bishop e7. Either g2 or a3 is going to fall, and this and for the time being, white is only up one miserable isolated pawn, and one miserable double and isolated pawn. So this is going to be winning for us with a very pleasant position here. So yeah, that's no good. And if e5 happens, then we can play bishop e7. And if we can, then we're going to play d5 next move, just to close the position, possibly get some counterplay with b5, b4, maybe rook ac8, all of those kind of moves that are very useful. And after e takes d6, which needs to be played, otherwise we're going to get in that d5 move. Then after bishop f6, queen e3, we can play bishop c6 here to take control of the long diagonal, and this pawn is actually not going to advance anytime soon, so we have no worries about it. And here I analyze two moves. a3 looks reasonable at first glance. You just want to like get the pawn out of any danger, but we can just take on c3 with the bishop, and after queen takes c3, we're going to ruin white's pawn structure and take on g2. Next move, we're going to play one of the rooks to d8, stop the pawn, play bishop c6 back, and white is left with this terrible structure with this double pawn and isolated pawn. And I'm still, I still don't believe that the computer says this is equal. I'm pretty sure this is good for black. But yeah, and if rook d3 happens, which is the best move, just defending this knight from being taken, and we don't want to give up the bishop here, obviously. So bishop takes g2, just taking back the pawn. After rook g1, bishop c6, this queen on a5 is very active. Our king is very safe on g8. It's not going to get attacked anytime soon, and we can actually get one of the rooks behind the pawn, maybe rook fd8, and maybe rook ab8 and b5, b4, and some ideas like that, with a very good position also. So yeah, that's what can happen here after bishop f6. And if rook hf1, which is interesting, just trying to pile up the pressure, maybe prepare some f5 ideas. Then we can play rook fd8 here, and after king b1, bishop c6, I don't see any problems here. Yeah, okay, maybe white can push this one, but I think something simple like queen e5, trying to get the queens off the board, queen d3, and maybe, yeah, okay. The computer recommends already rook e8, and this seems to be about equal here, and maybe something simple like rook ad8 seems to be fine. I don't see any problems for black, at least in this position, so we're just going to leave it at that. And yeah, there's this e5 move, and after d takes e5, fe5, this is similar to the main line, but notice that the bishop is on e2, and normally the bishop is on c4, so that's the only difference in this position if we compare them. And here, notice that even if white decides to take on f6, this bishop on g5 is going to be hanging. However, even in that case, we need to be careful, because right now white is threatening that move to attack this guy, and also the bishop on d7 is kind of loose. And if we play bishop c6, which is what we play in the main line, then after bishop takes f6, we're just going to get a terrible pawn structure here with gf6, and obviously not taking, because there's going to be queen g5 and then taking back with the bishop, but knight d5 here is very strong. And after bishop takes d5, ef6, this is gonna be really bad here. Bishop f6 is kind of forced, and queen f6. With this much activity, I don't think this is gonna turn out well for black. So we need to play the move here, rook fd8, which is kind of surprising, but it's just to fence this guy. And there are many moves that are analyzed in this position. First one is rook h to f1, after which we can play bishop e5, making use of this discovered attack, and also we want to trade off the bishops. After queen f4, we can play bishop takes e2. The queen on f4 obviously tries to put some pressure on the f-file, and after this move, white has to take on e2 with the knight. We play rook takes d1, king takes d1. Okay, so white is trying to keep the pressure on the f1, but we can play rook d8, and after king b1, this move rook d5 is very nice. This targets the bishop, and if e takes f6 happens, then we can first off play bishop d6, attacking the queen, and next move we just take on g5, with our king being very safe and our rook very active and queen very active here. So bishop takes f6 is possible, but after this we just take on f6 with the pawn, and after the e takes f6, we can play bishop takes f6, noting that queen takes f6 actually loses to rook f5, because if the rook captures, then there's going to be queen e1 mate, and the computer already recommends queen takes f5 here, just giving up the queen. So yeah, king b1 here is kind of forced, and here we can play rook f5, and again we have this very strong bishop on this diagonal, very active pieces, and our king is actually relatively safe here. So we should be slightly better, I mean equal if not slightly better there. And if instead of knight takes e2, rook takes d8, then we can take on d8, knight takes e2, and rook d5, transposing to the line that we just saw before. So that is what happens if rook hf1. If queen e3, just getting out of the e-file, then we can play knight d5 here. Very important that yeah, we have this move attacking the queen, and after knight takes d5, we play bishop g5, obviously not losing a piece. Queen g5, e d5, king b1, and we will later see this position where we actually play the move d4 here, sacrificing the pawn to play bishop e6 and trade a bunch of pieces there, and that endgame should be fine for black. And if bishop h4 happens, then we can play again bishop e5, same move, and there's this known queen sacrifice, e takes f6, and this is, just know that you shouldn't be afraid of this. After rook takes d4, fe7, rook takes h4, white's idea is to take on b5 here, and then we play rook b4, and white has to promote now, otherwise moving the bishop elsewhere, it's just gonna, it's gonna be problematic for for white. It's not gonna give anything. So e8 queen, rook takes, bishop takes, king f8, and after a3, trying to kick the rook off of the control over the b5 square, so the bishop can retreat. Rook c4 is possible, but we just chosen this game between David Cumming versus Joshua Sitoris. I'm not sure if it's a correspondence game or not, but it's been played before. But this rook g4 move seems to be cleaner with pressure on g2. And after bishop b5, rook takes g2, h4, a6, bishop d3, and h5 was played in one of these games, but I like this move queen e5. And we have a very solid structure here. We threaten the immediate rook h2 here to try to trade some pieces to loosen white's control over the h-pawn and make it easier for us to move our queenside majority. And this, I think, provides us good chances for the win, even though objectively it should be equal, but I do like black's chances here. So that's the queen sacrifice that you need to know. But there's also this move queen e3, after which we need to play the move knight g4. If you play knight d5, apologies about that. If you play a move like knight d5, which looks similar, attacking both pieces, the problem is that there's this move rook d5, and if we take on h4 here, then rook takes b5 just wins a piece on the spot. If we take back, then the bishop is going to be lost, so that is no good. So we need to play this move knight g4, attacking both the queen and this bishop. And after rook takes d8, bishop takes g4, bishop takes h4, white needs to play the move queen c5 here to pin the bishop. Otherwise, if they play a move like knight takes b5, then we can actually just take on a2 here. And even though we're sacrificing a piece, this is going to be decisive. After knight c3, queen a1, knight b1, h6. Very, okay, it's not subtle at all, but it's very simple, just to threaten bishop g5. And white only has one way to prevent the loss of the queen, or getting mated on the spot here, which is rook f1 to try to go to f4 after bishop g5 and rook f4. But we can play this move queen a6. This first off just threatens, I think, the immediate, queen f1, if I'm not mistaken. Or even the move, queen b6 here, threaten the move queen b6 to try to trade here, and then we can take on f4 with an intermezzo. And here a move like knight d2 is yeah, it's already recommended with the engine, but after which we can play queen a1, knight b1, and queen a5. We reposition the queen here to threaten bishop takes f4, followed by queen e1 mate. And if white plays something like knight d2, then we can just play rook takes d2, queen d2, and then take on f4 with a completely winning endgame up 2 pawns eventually, yeah, after one of the pawns fall. And if g3 here, which is the best move, is played, then we can play this move rook d5, where we're not rushed to take this pawn, we're also attacking this pawn. And white can play queen c3 here, after which we play queen b6, threaten queen g1, yeah, with some decisive effect. And after knight d2, we play bishop f4, gf4, and queen g1. It looks like white is just up material here, but actually this f4 pawn is going to be lost very soon after the forcing bishop d1, queen f2, some pressure on this yeah, on this position, knight f3, and queen f1, queen e1, and queen c4. And eventually we see that this f4 pawn is lost, and white is going to have serious trouble defending this position with white's active rook here and pass pawns on this one, on this side of the board, with like g5 coming, for example. So that is no good. And if white plays queen c5 here, which prevents like any bishop c6 to try to get on this long diagonal, then we can play a6 here, and king b1, b6, queen c7, and rook d7. And we can repeat here with queen c8, rook d7, rook d8, rook d7. And yeah, essentially this is going to end up as a draw. But obviously, if you want to continue playing on, you can play something like king f8, which comes with its inherent risk, obviously. And the next move is this move queen f4, after which we can actually just get a simplified endgame here after knight d5, knight takes d5, and bishop takes g5, obviously not to lose a piece. After queen g5, ed5, and king b1, we get the same position as we saw before, and here the move that can equalize is d4 here. Just giving up the pawn to prepare this bishop e6 move. And after rook takes e4, bishop e6, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, and b3, we just played in this game between Tihomir Tashkov and Lyuben Spasov in 1982. I've never heard of these players before, but f6 was played in that game, but here h6 seems to be a clean equalizer here. We have a good bishop here, and our rook is active on this open file. Next, we can play rook d2, try to apply some pressure on the position. Maybe even possibly just like rook d5, try to gang up on this pawn, and this should be equal. So so exactly the same position actually as we got before. Yeah, and that's what happens if e5, I believe, if e5, and yeah, rook fd8. So this bishop e2 move I think is already covered. Yeah. Negi's recommendation. And here we can talk about h4. This move is kind of dangerous, I would say, because white is just solidifying this bishop on g5 and prepares this move e5. And here I think the best move is to play e5, just preventing white from ever pushing e5 themselves. The other moves, okay, you can check on the BGN yourselves. I just don't think that they are quite good. d5 was mentioned by FIDE master Amro El Jawich. Apologies for butchering that name. I don't think it equalizes because of this move king b1, and I'm just going to show you the line here. Bishop c5, queen d3, and knight g4, queen g3, h5. This was all mentioned in his chessable course. After bishop e2, bishop f2, queen d3, knight e3, and e5 here. Essentially, I just don't believe in this position after bishop d7, f5. I don't think this was mentioned in this course. And if we play knight takes f5, the problem is g4 comes and we are getting destroyed in this position. And if knight c4, which is recommended by the computer, then after queen f3, knight b2, like it looks like a mess, but it's actually nothing. King b2, rook ac8, rook h3, just defending the knight. After queen b4, king a1, bishop b4, there's this exchange sack, just rook takes d4, queen takes d4, and bishop e7. And f6 is going to come, and we are already in a material deficit here, so I really don't like black's position there, which is why I recommend the move e5 here. It prevents white from ever pushing e5, but it weakens the d5 square. But note that later at some point we can play like bishop e6 and something like that. If white takes on e5 now, we can just take back and play bishop e6 next, and this entire idea of like h4 and f4 is like, it doesn't really do anything because without this f pawn supporting white's attack, it's not going to amount to much. So queen e3 essentially has to be played, and after e takes f4, bishop takes f4, we can sacrifice the pawn here with bishop e6. If we play rook d8, then after bishop c4, white just has immense pressure on this diagonal, and yeah, this is not recommended. So we can play bishop e6 here, and after bishop takes d6, we play this move knight g4. Bishop takes d6, surprisingly, we don't get enough compensation. We can follow this game by Topalov against Discipliano, where a continued rook takes d6, rook ac8, a3, rook c6, rook c6, bc6, bishop e2, knight d7, rook d1, queen c7, and just look at the computer, it already says +2. We're just down a pawn here without any compensation. White is just going to win this slowly and steadily. So after this bishop takes d6 move, we can play the move knight g4 here. And this was played 2 times before. And after queen g3, you can play this move bishop f6, just sacrificing the rook here. And after bishop takes f8, rook takes f8. Notably in this position is that we have massive control over the e5 square. We can possibly put our bishop there on e5, and it's just going to look so beautiful there. And after rook h3, we're just defending this knight, and then like, yeah, I mean, we can just like capture an a2, for example. There was like that sort of threat. After queen b6 here, possibly like threatening some knight f2, or yeah, some of these ideas. Queen d6, queen takes d6, rook takes d6, and bishop e5. This bishop is just so beautiful here, preparing to go to f4. After rook takes rook d5, yeah, white decides to just give back the exchange here, and say that if you just take it, then white is going to be up a pawn and has decent chances for win. But after bishop f4, king b1, and knight f2, rook f3, this is a very forcing line. Knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop d5, rook takes f4, rook e8, bishop d3, and then f5. So we're going to win back the piece here after rook takes f5 and bishop e4. And best for white is to play something like rook a5 here, and after bishop g2, rook a7, or yeah, okay, the engine even recommends something like king c1, which is kind of strange, but I'm not so sure. Yeah, this is definitely not simple to win. I don't know what the engine's all so happy about 0.6, but yeah, and note that if white takes here, then this is going to be simple draw. We have some pressure over here, we're attacking this pawn, and yeah, at the very least, we're just going to win back this pawn, so that's very nice. So going back here. So the next move here is king b1, which is very illogical. You just want to play king b1 in these Sicilian positions. It does allow black the opportunity to consolidate and develop normally, in my opinion here, with the move rook d8. There's also this move h6, but after h4, this is kind of what I want to try to avoid. Because white is just going to play something like queen e3, bishop e2, queen g3, and then have some pressure on the position. Objectively, it should be fine, but if possible, I just want to avoid that possibility and play just rook d8. And there are many moves that I've analyzed here, such as like bishop d3, after which I think h6 can happen, and we are kind of forced to enter this h4 line, but we can play this move e5. So typically, once we play h6, we have this resource of playing e5 with our queen on a5, and let's say queen f2, then we can play e takes f4, and if queen takes f4, then we can just play queen e5 here, and once we trade off the queens, this is not going to be a big problem. White can take on f6 here, bishop f6, and play knight d5, but we can play bishop g4, and if white decides to take on f6 here, we're just going to bolster that pawn with rook d6, bring the other rook in, king g7, and the position's going to be completely fine. But so white can play rook d f1, but after rook d6, again the same story if they take on f6. Bishop c4, we can play rook c8 here. In one game, king f8 was played, which is kind of inaccurate, but there's this rook c8 move, and after bishop b3, bishop d8, and black's completely fine here. There's nothing to worry about, and we have the bishop pair. Possibly bishop e6 is going to come next, and we are good here. And if bishop takes f4, then we have this move bishop g4 to gain a tempo on the rook. And I think after, for example, rook d1, we can play possibly something like bishop e6 back. And we have massive control over the d5 square, and I don't think there's anything to worry about objectively here. So that's it about this move bishop d3. How about bishop e2 here? I think we can play this move h6, and again after bishop h4 we can play e5. A typical move is playing this h6 move first to kick the bishop back, and then only then playing e5. But there's this this pawn sacrifice after queen d3, trying to make use, like white wants to try to make use of this d file by not taking on e5 here, and even at the cost of a pawn. After e takes f4 and bishop e1, this threatens some discovered attacks, like for example knight d5, and so we need to go queen e5 here, defending the pawn. And there's this move g3, trying to provoke us to take here and activate the bishop, which we will not do. And after bishop e6, gf4, queen takes f4 and h4. This pawn just wants to get out of any danger, and white is preparing something like rook g1 here. And in the book Dismantling the Sicilian, this falling move knight g4 was not mentioned, and FIDE Master Amuro in his course mentions that this is the best move, which I do agree. And there are a couple of moves here. Rook f1 falls into black's hands after we play queen e3 because we're just up a pawn and we just want to trade pieces. The computer recommends like queen b5 here, but after something like rook ac8 or something like some of these moves, I don't see a reason why black's position is not just better here. Looks very active. And after knight d5, which is one of the better lines in this variation, bishop takes d5. Queen takes d5 cannot be played because of queen takes e2. And even though we lose f7, king a7, this rook on d1 is actually hanging, so white cannot just take it, take this bishop. So for example, bishop c3, there's like bishop f6 here, and again this pin cannot be made use of with like rook takes f6 because the rook is hanging, and we are just winning in this position. For example, rook d1, we can even play rook f8, or queen d2 is apparently recommended also by the engine, keeping pressure on this d1, and guessing queen e3 or something like that, or okay, rook f8 again. Yeah, and this seems to be winning for black. And instead of queen takes d5, e takes d5, and then we just take on d3, and then play knight e5, and we're just up a pawn here with a beautiful knight on e5. White is definitely significantly worse here. So the next move is this move bishop d2, which attacks the queen. But I think we can get a very solid position here after queen e5, and bishop takes g4, and rook d to g1, which is the idea here. But we can play h5 here. And as long as we know this following exchange sacrifice after knight d5, white is threatening the strong bishop c3 to get a monster bishop on this diagonal. And if white manages to do that, then they have full compensation, if not more. So we need to play this move rook ac8, and after bishop c3, rook takes c3. The exchange sack because the bishop there is just too strong. And after queen takes c3, knight takes e7 has to be played. The following line is like king f8 and knight g6, which is the idea. fg6, bc3, and rook e8. And I don't see a reason why black should be worse. The bishop on g4 is actually very useful. It's cemented by the pawn on h5. Even though we have a slightly worse pawn structure, we do have a pawn for the exchange, and we have pressure on the e-pawn. So next move we can possibly play like rook e5 and the king d7, king e7, and proceed from there. Meanwhile, if instead of knight takes e7, white takes on c3 with a knight, this is actually quite bad because we can play this move rook e8, and after the knight comes back, we can play this move bishop d8, and we are putting pressure on the e4 pawn. And if something like rook e1 happens, then we can play bishop f3, winning the pawn. So for example here, then we can just take here. After here, we can just play f5, completely winning here. The pawns are going to roll, and we have the bishop pair, so that is no good. But instead of that, rook g1 is the best move, and after which we can play knight e5, very beautiful knight here. And after queen d4, bishop takes h4, we're very greedy here. We just need to foresee that after bishop d2, queen f6, and rook d to f1, it looks like we're in trouble because if we just move the queen back, we are going to lose the h6 pawn here and be lost in that position. But there's this move knight f3, which is very nice. And after this following sequence, this tactical sequence of queen takes f6, knight takes d2, king c1, and bishop takes f6, rook takes f6, and king f8, we need to do this to try to capture this guy because the d2 knight is actually trapped. Rook takes e6, fe6, king d2, and rook ac8. this position is quite unclear. But I like the fact that we have two pass pawns on the king side, and we need some preparation to be able to push them forward. For example, rook c5 and the pushing g5, or rook c5 and the e5, and eventually we can get those pawns rolling. And I think black has decent chances for an advantage here to win in this endgame, at least in my opinion. So that covers this line of this queen d3 line. So yeah, bishop e2 is already covered. Let's talk about queen d2. The idea is that white can jump with knight d5 at any moment here, and just win the bishop pair, and like try to, yeah, there's maybe some tactics with like e5 winning a piece on the spot here because of this pin. So yeah, we need to be careful here. But I think we can just play h6 here, and after bishop takes f6, knight d5, queen takes d2, knight f6, g f6, rook takes d2, and king f8. We're gonna play king e7 next, play b6 and bishop e7, and I really don't see why white should be better here. This should be completely fine. So yeah. So the next move is bishop c4. Yeah, this is very similar to the main line. Yeah, okay. This is very similar to the main line, except I think we've played this rook d8 move. So yeah, I think we can just proceed with bishop d7 here, and I think e5 transposes to what it looks very similar to what we've seen before, but the difference is that the king is on b1 here. So after bishop e3 and bishop c6, I think that black has fully developed, and there are no problems dealing with the e5 threat because the rook is already on d8. And if a move like rook h to e1 happens, then I think we can play h6, bishop h4, and the queen h5 is a nice move. Bishop g3 seems to be the best move, yeah, keeping an eye on this h2 pawn, and then we can play d5 here. After e takes d5, knight takes d5, we can trade a bunch of pieces with like knight d5, bishop d5, and if white takes, then that's very compliant, but if they play rook e5, then we have this very nice move, bishop f3, which is played twice and according to the database. And after rook takes h5, rook takes d4, rook takes d4, bishop takes h5. This is equal material, and we both have the bishop pair, both sides have the bishop pair, and doesn't seem to be worse at all. For example, I think rook d7, we can just reply with rook d8, trading off the rooks because there's going to be a threat on the back rank here, and this should be very equal. I mean, it should be just like a dead draw. And if f5 happens here, then yeah, this is an aggressive attempt chosen by Córdoba Illescas, or Miguel Córdoba Illescas, I guess, or Miguel Illescas Córdoba against Alexei Shirov in 1995. Then I think we can just take on f5, follow the game, rook h1, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4, fe4, bishop takes f6, bishop f6, rook takes f6, which is the idea, it's very logical, gf6, and then bishop d5. Temporarily, white is down an exchange and 2 pawns, but e5 is going to fall next, f6 is also going to fall. So let's just follow the game, e3 here, threatening some resources with like e2 and stuff like that. So queen takes f6, and here we play rook f8, just defending f7. And unfortunately here we're going to have to go for the draw after this following sequence, which happened in the game. But yeah, if white decides to play on, for example, instead of queen g5 here, maybe something like queen f4, then yeah, we can just I think push the pawn forward, and it's gonna be white is just gonna have to force the draw anyways. So I think that's fine here for black. So that covers his bishop c4 move, and let's talk about h4, which is the main move in this position. You see 43 games in the Elite Chess database. After which we can play bishop d7. So yeah, preparing some bishop c6 ideas. After bishop d3, we can play this move d5. I don't think any other move equalizes actually. For example, bishop c6, and I think that both queen g1 and queen e3 give white the advantage here, because maybe we're threatening some queen c5, try to trade the queens off and get to an equal endgame, or like play h6 and trap the bishop. But queen g1, for example, d5, e5, bishop c5, queen h2, d4, knight e2, and okay, we can enter this line here, where I don't think that black is anywhere near equality here. we're just down on exchange, and we're gonna get the queens off the board, and the computer is gonna like this more and more for white eventually. So I like this move d5, and there are a couple of moves that could happen here. e5 is absolutely no good because of this bishop c5 move, and the queen is actually trapped. So you know, white just needs to resort to something like bishop h7, knight h7, and then move the queen back or something like that, but they're gonna be just down a full piece in that variation. So e5 is no good. Bishop f6 is possible, and after bishop f6 play e5, but we play bishop e7, and again we're threatening bishop c5, so white needs to move the queen away. Bishop e3, queen b6, and I like this move because if white decides to take on b6, after a b6 and g4, trying to get aggressive here, we can play rook a5, and I think with some ideas of like maybe doubling up on the a file and play like b5, b4, we have decent chances here to play for some counterplay. Meanwhile, if white decides to play something like queen c1, then we can play rook a c8, threatening some rook c3 stuff. After knight e2, we can play f5 here. Either f5 or rook c7 I like, I like personally. f5, the idea is just to close off this bishop, and there are no g4 ideas anymore, so white is going to have to change their plans here. And if e takes f6 happens, then bishop f6, and this bishop on this diagonal is like immensely strong. And I really like that variation. But if you want to play it safer, then rook c7 is also nice. The next move we're going to play is like rook dc8, and possibly try to trade the bishop on b5 here to try to loosen white's control over the c2 pawn. So a sample line is at g4, rook dc8, and if white just tries to continue their plan here, for example h5, try to get aggressive on us, then after bishop a4, provoking b3 here, we can play bishop b5. After knight d4, bishop d3, rook d3, and bishop c5, we're just attacking this knight. After knight e2, we can play a5, and black is already better here. We have the initiative, the combination of a4 as well as like bishop e4, and once the knight moves from here, then maybe bishop c3 can come, and this is going to be very, very good, almost a decisive advantage. Queen f3 is possible, but this looks very bad after bishop a3, provoking b3, and then we can play rook dc8. So the reason that this rook comes over here is because this rook on a8 can support this a5, a4 push. Meanwhile, this rook on d8 wasn't actually doing anything, so the d file's already closed. So let's say, for example, knight e2, then a5, and we already have the advantage here with a4 coming. So that covers this, I think, this bishop f6 move and then e5. So let's talk about other moves like queen e3. Just stepping out of the way, we can play d takes e4 here. And after bishop takes f6, we can play g takes f6. And this variation will be discussed in the move order when white plays the 11th move, king b1, so following this one, and rook d8, and then h4. Yeah, we'll possibly just cover that later. Yeah, essentially the structure is fine. Gf6 just takes control over the g5 square, so that knight e4 and g5 is not a possibility. And we'll discuss that later. So yeah, that covers this king b1 move. Let's talk about e5 here, which is one of the main variations as well. As you can see here, in the 2010s, or even like in the latest is probably 2017 in this database. Vityugov chose this, Nepomuyashi, Sutovsky, Short. So yeah, this is definitely not a bad line. After d takes e5, white can play queen takes e5 here. Fe5 is a mistake because of rook d8, getting a tempo on the queen. After queen f4, we can play rook d1. After king d1, play knight d5. And once we trade on d5 and then king c1 and we trade here, and for example bishop d7, this e5 pawn is overextended, and we're going to definitely win it at some point. Additionally, we're going to play bishop c6 next and just get a lot of activity. So this is really not good, and shows the danger of what happens if white is not careful and overextends here with e5 without sufficient support. So queen takes e5 needs to be played, after which we can just trade on e5 here and then play knight e5. And I think this is going to lead to pretty much very dry and drawn endgame. But we just need to know a few things about this position. For example, after bishop e7, knight e7, it looks very equal, but Note that this e5 pawn is kind of overextended. However, it does give white the opportunity to play something like knight e4 at some point, or like bishop d3 to e4. So after bishop d3, we play b6 here. And rook h1, I think, allows this bishop b7 move. And it looks like there's a tactic here with bishop h7, king h7, and rook d7. But we can just take this pawn on g2, rook e7, and a6. We prevent knight b5, and this should be equal. All 4 games in the database, in the Lichess database, have ended in a draw here. So yeah, just don't be worried about that tactic. But if bishop e4, then we can play rook b8. And after knight b5, we can play bishop b7. This is in the game Viju versus Bredke. And after rook h1, we can just take on e4 here. In the game, I think a6 was chosen, but let's just say bishop e4, rook e4, and rook b7. And there should be no problems in this position. Yeah, it seems to be very equal there. But after rook h1, then we play bishop b7, rook d7 is possible. But after bishop e4, rook takes e4, knight c6, this knight is already defending a7. And let's say knight b5 tries to get into some initiative. But no, we don't allow that. We just trade off the rooks. Rook d6, rook d6, e d6, and a6 here, kicking the knight away. Knight c7 and rook d8. I've analyzed 2 moves here. After rook c4, we can just play knight e5, harassing this guy. And then rook d4, a5. Let's say b3, king f8, king b2, knight d7, try to head to c5. And this should be holdable with correct play. And if rook a4 happens, then we can again play a5, knight b5, and knight e5 here. Let's say rook a3, rook c8, b4, a takes b4, rook a7. This is like the most critical variation that I could find based with the help of the computer. After knight d3, king d2, and knight c5. Yeah, just stopping the pawn. King e3, g5, trying to get some loop for the king and prepare the king march forward. Let's say rook c7, rook d8, king d4, king g7, king c4. And here we should just play king g6. And actually, the computer says that this is already slightly better for black. And let's just see sample line, for example, g4. Then we can play knight e4, attacking the pawn. And after rook c6, king f6 just threatens king e5 to win the pawn. This is already kind of an endgame, but just know that this endgame is completely fine. And actually, we can possibly get this position. Take here, and then h5, and then takes on h2, at f3. And then we go back here, and we sacrifice a piece. Get this endgame with 2 connected pass pawns. Actually, 4 connected pass pawns against white's very advanced d-pawn. And this should actually be technically better, if not winning, for black here. It should be decisive for D, actually. So just note that this endgame is completely fine, and there are some tricks here. Yeah, that you need to know. Actually, you don't need to know any of this. I mean, just like play this equal endgame-ish and use your instincts and calculation. But yeah, that's what happens with e5. And let's talk about bishop c4, which is the main move by far. And and we're just gonna talk about this move bishop d7. I've tried to make this h6 move work, but I just couldn't make it work after bishop h4 and then like e5. Okay, this is maybe playable, but I think the main lines are more trusted, even though this line seems to be quite solid here. The only problem that I'm kind of finding is like where to put this bishop, but maybe g4 is fine. Yeah, there are some technical things that you need to work out there, but let's just talk about bishop d7 here. And there's some side moves here like rook h1 or rook d3, but the main move by far is e5 here. Let's just talk about rook h1. I was quite curious about what happens after this move, but I think this just loses the threat, and we can play bishop c6. Let's say bishop e3, just retreating. We just played most of the games. Rook f8, e5, d5, and there are a bunch of moves here. Rook e5 is just not good because we play queen c7, and white's pieces are not really very harmonious because, I mean, white cannot make use of like trying to open up the f file and do stuff like that. The bishop on g5 isn't exactly putting any pressure anymore now that the e-pawn has been traded off here, so that's no good. And if fe5 happens, then we can just play rook a8, getting a tempo. Queen f4, rook takes d1, so it's important to trade off one pair of rooks. After rook takes d1, knight d7, we're already attacking this pawn on e5. And let's say bishop e7, rook e7, and rook e1. We can play b5 here, And next we can play either knight c5 and bring the rook to e8 back, or play rook b7. And white's light squared bishop is just out of the game with this e6 pawn just blunting it entirely. Where after we play knight c5, we're definitely not going to take, but we're just going to play against the bad bishop. So queen e5 needs to be played here if white decides to go for this rook h1 and then e5. So after queen e5, fe5, knight d7, this pawn again is kind of overextended, so we should be completely fine here after bishop e7, rook e7, let's say g3, rook c8, rook e3, and I found this knight b6 move quite reliable. Knight f8 was chosen in the game between Judo Polgar and Anand. Anand chose this move, and okay, it's fine, like knight e2, rook c7, this move, and then eventually the game ended in a draw here with repetition in course 2000. But this knight b6 move is quite interesting. I think this keeps some chances alive with like the rook e to c7 coming, and then like king f8, king e7, and maybe I mean the computer already says that this is like slightly better for black, so I would trust this evaluation. Maybe something like a5, as you can see here, some a5, a4 ideas maybe, and yeah, this should be okay. So that covers this rook h1 move. Let's cover rook d3 here. This is interesting because white just wants to bring the rook to g3 here, and yeah, and the best move here is to play the move rook d8, which Kramnik chose against Anand a few times actually. I mean he's played this like 4 times according to this database, so that's very reliable. And I couldn't get this move e5. I mean this e5 move is just looks quite dubious because after d e5, queen e5, because fe5 I think just runs into bishop c6, and yeah, this is not looking good for white. So queen e5, we can play this move queen b4, just attacking this bishop, and we're following this Kramnik and Anand game. So rook g3, threatening some bishop f6 stuff. So king h8, bishop d3, bishop c6, a great diagonal here. After rook h3, it looks kind of dangerous because there's this threat of bishop f6 and they're taking on h7, but that's exactly what's going to happen. Rook f8, giving the king 1 square on f8 to run away to. And the bishop takes f6 is actually a mistake here, because bishop f6, rook h7, king g8, queen h5, king f8, and suddenly black is just better here. There's no knight e4 coming, and this c3 knight is very loose. So let's say after rook e1, there's also this move rook takes d3, and rook h8, king e7 takes, and then takes with the bishop, cd3, cd3 here, and then bishop takes c3, bc3, queen c3, king d1, queen d3, king c1, and queen c4, king d2, and queen b4, trying to get the bishop involved by getting the king to the light squares, one of these 2 squares. So king e2, bishop b5, king f3, queen e1. There's this move queen c5, but after king d8 and queen 6 b5, black is just down. Black is just up a pawn in this endgame. And let's say after queen c3, black's queen is also a lot more active, and black has a queenside majority here. So this should provide some good chances for a win. So bishop f6 is no good, surprisingly, and queen e2 was chosen in both games, I believe, in the database. After which we can play h6 and rook f1, king g8, bring the king back, bishop h4, and then knight d5. And this is already a very good position for black. I mean, there are no like queen e4 moves because we can just take it and trade it off, and this looks very equal after we trade everything on d5. And the bishop is possibly going to land on d5, or like maybe the pawn is going to recapture with a very good position. And the main move according to theory is this move e5 by far. And after d takes e5, there's this move queen takes e5, which is chosen by Karpov once against Kamsky in 1994. And queen b6 was chosen in the game, and it doesn't really resolve the position to clarity. So I would just suggest this move b5. And there's some complications that happen after these 4 moves, but essentially after, for example, knight b5, then we can play queen b6 here, and this is one of the shorter lines where we can play rook ab8 next, and yeah, and we're threatening some stuff here. For example, knight c3, bishop c6, and we have definitely a lot of competition with this bishop, and yeah, with the bishop pair, and rook ab8 coming, and rook fc8 also possibly. And if bishop b3 happens, then a5, maybe a4 even. And if, for example, we can imagine the bishop b3, and then we push a5, and then white pushes a4. like bishop b3, a5, and then a4, for example, then we can maybe even infiltrate the dark squares with queen b4. Some weak dark squares there. So that's an interesting idea. And if f5 here, which is very interesting. In this database, at least, there has been no games that follow this. We need to follow this quite forcing line after knight g4, queen f4, bishop g5, queen g5, and e takes f5, rook takes d7, b takes e4, rook d5, queen b6, rook takes f5, knight e3, rook c5, and then rook a e8. And already in this position, we're defending the knight on e3 and preparing f6 here to dislodge the knight from the queen. And so this should be equal. For example, knight d5, we can trade, and rook d5 is no good because we can play rook e2 and get some activity with this way. And the rook is very active. The king is going to come to h7, queen f6, and a lot of activity there. And instead, queen d5 can happen, but we just play rook b8. After b3, we can take on b3, a b3, and play h6. I think this is easiest. Rook fd8 is going to come next with complete equality here. And the next move in this position is the move bishop b5. And we can just take on b5 here and queen b5 and play queen c7. And next move, if white does nothing, then rook a b8 and rook fc8 can come, and so it's going to be very unpleasant for white to deal with this pressure. So white is just going to have to try to accept playing queen e5 and try to trade the queens off. And after which we can just play queen b6, and white is kind of forced to play queen b5 here and repeat. If something like king b1, then we can play rook a b8, b3, h6, bishop h4, queen c6, applying some pressure here, as well as attacking the g2 pawn. Let's say rook d3 and queen g2. And we have equality here, equal material and stuff. Meanwhile, if, let's say, bishop b3 happens, then there's this move h6 I think I like. After bishop h4, we can play queen b6 here, clearing up the a pawn to be pushed forward. And let's say after knight e4, we can play knight g4, very forcing here. And after queen d4, we trade the queens off and take on h4. And this is going to lead to a very equal endgame after rook d7, rook fd8, rook hd1, and knight e3. So this forces more pieces to come off the board. And we're going to have some pressure on g2 at the very end. Bishop d8, g3, bishop c7. Not very sure why this move is recommended, but this seems to be good. A place maybe preventing like knight d6. So let's say h3, knight f5, with some threats on knight g3. So king d1, knight d4, knight c3, g5, fg5, hg5, knight e4, and king g7. And this position is slightly better for black because this bishop on b3 again is like not active at all. So when you see this bishop b3 move, we should be kind of happy to see this because it is kind of blocked out in this, and in this endgame it's quite favorable for black. So yeah, that's what happens after b5. And the main move by far is fe5. And we can play bishop c6 here, making use of the fact that this bishop on the square is actually hanging. So if bishop takes f6, which is possible, I mean obviously ef6, just queen g5, and then like king b1, bishop f6 is just winning. Yeah, that's just that's just no good. So yeah, let's say h4 here, which is a possible line, but I think we can play rook fd8, queen f4, and play this move knight h5, which is chosen by a few good players like Leonid Yurasin, Dmitry Gurevich, Andrei Karlov. And let's say after queen g4, we can play bishop g5, queen g5, and g6, just protecting the knight here. And there's some things to note after bishop e2. The surprising move h6 gives black some advantage here. The point is after queen h6, we can just take this pawn. So that was like a kind of deflection move. Take this pawn on e5, and after bishop f3, we can take on f3, and then take on d1, and then play queen f6 with a double attack on these two pawns. So after queen e3, queen h4, we're just up a pawn here, slightly better in this endgame. So queen e3 has to be played, after which we play knight g7, and we're heading to f5. So after bishop d3, there's this h5 move, just preventing any h4 pushes or h5 pushes from white, and it's very solid here, you see. And after rook hg1, which I thought was quite natural, there's this actually really nice move called with knight f5. After bishop f5, yeah, I think the computer recommends to take on d1 first. And if rook takes d1, then after ef5, this bishop is actually attacking this pawn in g2. So e6, I think, yeah, rook e8 seems to be better for black. ef7, queen f7, king f7, queen f4, and yeah, something like queen e5. This should be better for black with a very strong bishop on c6. So yeah, and theory suggests that bishop d2 is the best move. And after we move the knight to the only good square, which is knight d7, white is going to play knight d5 here and just win the bishop. And there are two moves here. Queen c5 just transposes because white just wants to take on e7, and we're going to have to take back either way. So go for this. And queen d8 is by far the main move. And after knight e7, queen e7, I'm going to talk about this sideline, which is h4. I don't think it's quite good. It's just too optimistic. And we actually have a really nice move here, which is queen c5, which we want to aim for. And after the exchange on c5 here, it looks like white is winning a piece after bishop b4. But we have this incredible resource of rook fc8, chosen by Dmitry Gurevich. And after bishop takes c5, bishop takes g2, we're attacking these two bishops. And in the game, rook h2 was played, after which black actually gained advantage, like rook c5, attacking both things. And after bishop e6, a desperado, bishop c6, bishop d7, rook e5, takes, and rook d7. I think a5 was played in the game, but rook f5 just prevents any rook f2 ideas, and black is just up a pawn in this position. However, there is a b4 move, after which we just take on h1, and then play b6. Yeah, and after bishop a6, the only move, just to not lose material, bc5, bishop c8, rook c8, b5, f5, ef6, gf6. This endgame is equal. We have two strong passed pawns in the center of the board ready to be pushed forward. King f7, and meanwhile white has some play here with a possible outside passed pawn on the queen side, I believe. So this h4 move is not an inaccuracy like per se that it's horrible, but it does allow black to equalize. The rook h to e1 move is the move that I've been it's been very difficult to find a way to equalize here, and I don't think black objectively equalizes. However, I do think that the results of this position in Grandmaster play does not, I mean, it tells the entire story, which is that it's not very easy for white to gain the advantage here, and most of the games have ended in a draw, and some even black have won. And I've spent a lot of time on this move knight b6, which is possible, and it was played by Wang Hao and Miroshnichenko against Sergei Karyakin. And I couldn't justify this because there are so many moves here. Like there's bishop d3, which I didn't really go into. There's this, I did go into bishop b3 and bishop f1. Bishop f1 is by far the main move. You're trying to, eventually it will go to d3 again after queen g4. And you can check the notes in the PGN I uploaded in the description below, but essentially I don't think black equalizes there very easily. And after rook fd8, which is the main move, so instead of knight b6, bishop f1 is a sideline here that was chosen by Carlsen and Ivanchuk also. You can see in these games that Evgeny Alexeyev drew this game against Carlsen and Kamsi against Ivanchuk. And after the standard knight f8 here, which the idea is to just bring the knight to g6 and possibly target this pawn on e5, because this pawn is kind of overextended. There are two moves here. Queen e3, I found that we can just play a5 here with plan of b5, b4. And there's this bishop to c3 move, which is kind of annoying, because if we play b5 immediately, there's this queen b6 resource. However, we can just play rook d to c8, and now we're really trying to play b5 here. And let's say rook d4, b5, h4, b4, bishop d2, queen c7, and we have some like possible mating threats here, like for example h5, bishop b5, and the two moves that I've researched are like, are like bishop d3 here, after which we just play h6, preventing the pawn from being put forward. After bishop e4, knight h7 is a nice move. White cannot take on here because of the mate threat, and this idea was recommended by Stockfish, and This knight is just heading to g5 after, let's say, queen f2, rook a b8, king b1, queen e7, and we have a dynamic position here where we're preparing knight g5 with quite a solid position actually. Let's say bishop f3, king h8, safeguarding the king, b3, knight g5, bishop e3, rook c7, preparing to double up, bishop e2, and we just trade on e2, play rook b5, try to attack this guy, bishop f4, rook d7, rook e d2, rook b to d5, queen e3, and queen d8. And this position is completely equal. We're going to trade all of the pieces off the board and just just draw in a typical computer fashion. And there's the c4 move, after which I've discussed bc3, bishop c3, and rook a b8, h6, gh6. We have to kind of do this, otherwise we don't. I think it's very hard to equalize here. But after bishop takes b5, rook b5, rook e to d1, we bring the knight to g6 here, and we're threatening this pawn a lot. And the best move here is to play the move queen f3, trying to infiltrate here. And once we take the pawn on e5, this bishop is actually going to be monster. So that is something that you need to note. Though it is completely fine in this position. So after queen e7, king b1, knight e5, queen e3. There's some like possible threats of like rook e5 here, king the knight back, and maybe rook g4. So we play h5 here to prevent any rook g4 ideas. And after queen e2, rook b to c5, we're preparing already this very clear idea to just take on c3. Now both of the rooks defend each other and they're lined up on the c file. And after queen takes h5, queen f6, preparing queen g6. If white allows that, then we're just going to get a completely equal endgame. King a1, rook takes c3. So this exchange attack comes now. After bc3, rook c3, rook h1, and h6, giving back the pawn, but we just want to activate the king. So queen h6, queen h6, and here rook c2, attacking the g2 pawn. g3, king g7, rook h1, f5, and already we can see that these pawns are marching up the board, and the knight is actually quite active on here. So I have personally I wouldn't fear anything in this position. Let's say rook a4, rook c5, king b1, king f6, rook c1, bishop b5, king c2, rook d5 here. After rook d1, rook c5, white has to stay in the box here, stay in this kind of box here, because if king d2 happens, then knight c4 and the knight b2 will fork the pieces. So after king b2, knight c4 here, and then we go back. We're gonna play knight g4 next, maybe e5, and actually our knight is gonna support this e-pawn being pushed up the board. So black has some decent chances here. I mean, if anyone's gonna win, then it's possibly black, if black doesn't blunder any of the pawns. So I do like this variation. It's kind of long, and it's not going to happen ever, but it's gives kind of an insight into what could happen in the position there. Yeah, and this queen g4 move, it looks similar to the main lines. And after knight g6, bishop b4, we can take on d1, and then take on e5 here. And there's actually we're following the game Alexeyev versus or Carlsen rather versus Alexeyev. And after queen g7 and desperado, king g7 and bishop e7, knight g4, the knight is possibly coming to e3 here to pressure some weak points and maybe trade off the knight for the bishop. After bishop e2, knight e3, rook g1, bishop e4, c3, rook c8 happen all in the game. Bishop g5, knight d5 here, a3, f6, bishop d2, king f7, g3, a6, a4, knight b4. Black had no problem in this endgame after trading off especially, and this does not look any worse for black. Of course, good technique is a must, but I just want to show you what happened in this game. Even down a pawn, this is completely drawn. I think okay. After king east, this one ended. Complete draw. So that's what happened in the game, Alexeyev versus Carlsen. And instead of this bishop f1 move, the main move by far is queen g4, after which we play knight f8. And again, the idea is just to play knight g6 and try to pressure the e5 pawn. So there are a few moves that I've researched in this position. Bishop f1 is a safer way to approach the position, but I think it's unnecessarily passive. We can play a move like knight g6, and after bishop b4, we can take on d1, and then just take on e5. Okay, and this transposes to the Carlsen, the Alexia Carlsen game that we just saw before. h4 is kind of an inaccuracy because of this move, queen c5. We don't really see this move, queen c5, often, but in this position is really good. The point is that after bishop b3, we can play a5, and black is very quick to attack the position here. After a4, because we are threatening a4 with the bishop supporting this pawn, and the rook also. a4, rook d4, attacking the queen. After queen g3, we just take on a4 here, and bishop h6 is a nice try, but we just play knight g6 with nothing to worry about in this position. Queen d7, rook d1, queen b5, and this is completely winning for black. With like h5, we can just trade and then play like rook c8, or like bring the knight back to d7 to f5, and it's very much better here. Bishop b3 just loses tempo for no reason. And if bishop c3 happens, then there are a bunch of moves here that I've tried to make work, but queen f2 seems to be the one that is best to attack this pawn. And after rook d6, queen takes g2, queen d4, which happened in the game Zoltan Almasi versus Peter Lecco. Rook d c8, possibly preparing b5 here. Bishop d2, bishop f3. Okay, so knight g6 was chosen in the game, but bishop f3 stopping this push and also taking control over d1 seems to be quite good for black here. Yeah, I mean, there's so many lines that could occur from this, but to my eye, something like knight g6 and then maybe like queen g4, trying to trade off the queens, it looks very, very reasonable. So that is what can happen after this h4 move. But again, by far, rook d3 is the main move. And in here, the computer just hates this position. It just says +1 or even like +1.1 for white. And I've tried to make a few moves work. h5 was recommended at first by the engine, after which the idea is if queen takes h5, then we can just take on d3 here, making use of some geometry, cd3 and bishop a4, because this rook is trapped. And if b3 is horrible with this open c file and queen a3 also coming. King a3, king b1, and then taking here, they cannot take back, or maybe they have to take back, yeah. And maybe we just end up in draw, but I think rook d8 to, yeah, like something like rook d8 to d2, yeah, I don't know. Something like this seems to be also quite good. But obviously we can just go for the draw, and that's sufficient. And so king b1 here, and then like bishop d1 is the main variation, and queen c5 here. And okay, after rook f1 and f5, white practically looks slightly better here, but and so this is not like this h5 move of sacrificing the pawn is not what I'm recommending, but I want to show you that like this is some very interesting analysis that queen e2 is actually the best move, not taking the pawn. After knight g6, king b1, queen h4, g3, queen g4 is the top engine line. After trading off here on bishop g5, rook d5, and taking on g6 here, I just hate the triple pawns here. Yeah, maybe it's holdable, but it's definitely not pleasant for black here. So I'm not recommending this h5 move, but I just wanted to show its analysis. And rook takes d3 is actually the second most played move, which is played by some very good players like Anand, Kramnik, let's see who else, Peter Lecco, Suat Talik, Lenderman, Dmitry Gurevich, and so many other good players. But it just doesn't hold about their cd3. Queen d7 used to be the main move, but it's just not good. After bishop b4, knight g6, bishop d6, f5, queen g5, bishop e5, and here queen c6, queen b6. Okay, and we can enter this line, but yeah, the engine already says that it's like yeah, it's very, very bad here. I think we're following a Svidler game or something like that. Yeah, but this is the game ended up in a draw, but white was winning at some point. And I've tried to make queen c5 work, and I've also tried to make knight g6 work, but I think after king b1, queen c5, bishop c3, queen f2, rook e2, queen f4, queen g3, a thematic idea, because if we take, then the knight cannot jump into the position. Rook d8, rook f2, queen a4 here. b3, and we're just following a Harika versus Lenderman game played in 2015 Gibraltar Masters. Queen b5, h4, h5, king b2, rook d7, queen g5, a5 here, and then g4. And white was completely winning here, although the game ended in a draw. And so I just can't seem to make this rook takes d3 sacrifice work. And so after asking in the forums, this rook d5 move seems to be the best. The computer doesn't like this still, but there are a couple moves here. I just don't think that this is like so easy for white to play either. I mean, it's definitely better for white and it's more comfortable, but to gain an advantage and convert it to win, it's not easy at all. And some of the people in like the chess.com forums, International Master, I forgot his name, I'll put his username and his like comment on the screen right now. He also mentioned something about the position after rook d5. So yeah, here there are a few moves. There's bishop e4, which is the main move, after which we can play queen d8. And I've used many games in the database to try to study this position. There are a couple of moves here. g3. It was played by Hracek versus Cotronius in 2003. And after knight g6, attacking this pawn, bishop c3 was the idea. After which we just try to gang up the pawn more with queen c7. Note that like this g3 move is kind of like a preparatory in case of knight g6, so that black cannot play like queen h4 in that kind of position, which we will see often. After bishop c3, queen c7, h4 is one of the possible moves, but there's also this bishop c4 move, which is chosen by Darman Sadvakasov against Andrei Karlov in 2002. And after rook takes d1, and b5 here, bishop b3 was chosen in the game, which landed some trouble after a5 here, threatening a4 and also controlling the b4 square as to not allow white to play bishop b4. And a3 was chosen, and then knight e7. And next move, black played bishop d5 and actually got a really good position here after trading off the bishops and planting a knight on d5. After bishop d2, it doesn't really help white's position, so after bishop d5, knight d5, bishop h6, queen e5, the g7 square is just completely defended, and after bishop d2, b4, a4, and rook c8, black was completely winning here in this game, played in Dubai 2002. So h4 here is possible, and after knight e5, there's this move bishop takes h7, king takes h7 and queen h5. After king g8, rook takes e5 is kind of a must. Bishop e5, I think we could just play queen a5 with some pressure on this on this row. And so rook takes d5, bishop d5, and bishop takes e5. We can play queen d8 here, covering the g5 square, not to allow any queen g5s. And after queen g4, we can play f6. So this move also on d8, the queen on d8 also supports this pawn. And let's say after bishop c3, we play e5. And already you can see that this structure is very solid here for black. As long as we can consolidate here, we should be doing fine. After rook d1, which looks kind of dangerous, we have to play queen d6 here, only move. After a3, queen e6, trying to trade the queens off, queen e2, queen c6, queen e3, bishop f3, rook d3, and bishop g4. Black is already more than fine here in this game between Alexei Kuzmin and Tejas Bakre, played in Gibraltar Masters 2004. And after bishop e1, bishop f5, rook c3, and queen e4, they traded here and then played bishop f2. And actually the game was agreed to draw here, but I really like black's position here. Black can play bishop c6 first to close off the c file, and then play king f7, king e6, and try to make use of the light squares that white has weakened in the position. And this gives black some chances for a win here, so that's actually quite nice. And instead, queen g3 is a move chosen by Miroshnichenko in 2006, as well as Alisa Galiamova in 2003. And here we can play knight g6, attacking this pawn. And after c4, which is the idea in this position, we play rook d7 back, bishop d6, and queen h4. So this queen h4 move is the reason that often white decides to play g3. And here there are a couple of moves that have been played. In both games, rook d2 was played, which is kind of an inaccuracy because we take on g3, h3, and then play. Yeah, the computer already says something like f6 here and should be fine, technically speaking here. But the computer recommends here to take on h4, and then play g3, knight f5, and then play c5 here with good position actually for for white here. So this queen g3 move I think is quite dangerous. We possibly have to play something like maybe rook d4 here, or I'm actually quite not sure what to play here, what to recommend here actually. Something like b5 maybe to prevent c4. Yeah, maybe I like this variation. Bishop d6 is maybe gonna come here, but okay, we can try to get some counterplay on this side of the board with like for example bishop d6, knight g6, and the position should still be relatively okay. We'll get a similar position here with this b5 move, as we will see later. So just keep an eye out for that, because I will not like switch the positions back and forth like that. And there's this bishop d6 move. And after knight g6, let's look at a couple of moves here. There's some thematic ideas that you need to know. Bishop g6 is just not a good move, I think, because this structure after hg6 is a recurring theme that we will see, and we have some ideas for counterplay. h4 is the move that was chosen by most of these players, and we can just play queen a5 here with some threats on a2. If king b1 happens, then we play rook c8 with similar play to what I'm going to be discussing after a3. The idea is just to push the pawn to b5, and at some point after we make some more preparatory moves, we can take on d1 and play bishop d5, or if white takes, then we can just play bishop takes d5 with great coordination there. And if a3 happens, then we play rook c8, bishop b4, and then queen b6. And with these arrows, I just want to show some of the ideas. So the game Pavel Simacek versus Hannes Rau in 2006 continued with a subtle draw offer after the move like queen c7 first. So instead of queen b6, there's like queen c7, bishop d6, queen a5, bishop b4, and then queen b6, which we get now on the board. And black wants to trade on d1 and the plan of bishop on d5, as I've mentioned before, or push a5 here with tempo on the bishop on b4. Additionally, we can also like try to move the queen away from the b6 square to advance the pawn forward to b5. And there's a lot of counterplay here. In the game, queen f4 was chosen, after which rook d1, and bishop g2. Black is already better here, or he just like up a clean pawn in the game. But that's essentially all of these ideas are what I want to draw your attention to in this structure where white takes on g6. So yeah. Also possible is this move king b1. However, we have this very surprising move f5, making use of this loose bishop on d6, and so white cannot just take en passant here. And after queen c4, okay, there's also queen b4 here, but we can just play a5 and kick the queen away. So queen c4, queen d7, defending the e6 pawn. And next move, we want to play rook c8 with some counterplay here. For example, g5, there's also this bishop b5 move, queen b3, bishop d3, rook d3. We can trade here on d3 and play fg4. After rook g1, queen c6, there are some problems here with the back rank, so white just cannot take. And after a3 and knight f4, against both moves, queen f1 and queen e3, which the engine says are best, we can play queen f3 there, trying to trade the queens off. Against queen b3, we can already play h5 and already claim an advantage there, up a pawn. So this king b1 and then this king b1 move, just note that you can possibly play f5 here. And how about the g3 move? So this g3 move was tried a few times by Tivyakov in 1998, Mamedov in 2005, and the idea in this position, obviously, as I mentioned before, is just to prevent any queen h4. However, in this position, I think that we can get a lot of counterplay here with queen a5, again with some pressure on e5 and a2. So yeah, this position is very dynamic, and black just aims for active piece play, and I think objectively shouldn't be worse in this position. After bishop g6, hg6, again we reach the same structure, and I want to show after like king b1, b5, we get the same counterplay here. h4, rook c8, and yeah, as I said before, something like queen b6, a5, and we have a very good position here already. So yeah, that's also very nice. And how about queen g3? So this is similar to the queen g3 line that I just mentioned earlier. So there are some similarities in this position. And so I recommend the move b5 here. Again, queen h4 I cannot recommend because of this move, and then c4. C4 is very annoying. Rook a5, g3, knight f5, and then a3. Preparing like some, I mean, this just preparing maybe bishop b4 or something like that, and the rook on a5 is just horribly misplaced. So b5 here just prevents any c4 ideas that would make the rook feel very awkward. And best I could find here is like rook d2, queen h4, and queen h4 is not recommended by the computer, like in its, at least initially after I let the engine dig for a bit, it's not one of the top computer moves, but queen h4 looks very logical from a human perspective, trying to get the queens off the board. And after queen h4, knight h4, bishop e4, rook takes d2, and king d2. Note that like bishop c6 doesn't work because of rook c2, yeah. King c2 and rook c8, yeah, okay. So that line is fine, but rook takes d2, king d2, rook c8 here, bishop c6, rook c6, and rook e3. And after g5, with knight f5 coming, optically it doesn't look too bad. White does have a more active king here on d2, and a strong bishop on d6 that prevents moves like king f8. Yeah, but I think this is best. Like, I mean, this is the most that black can get out of this position. So that's kind of the drawback of studying this bishop e7 Richter-Rauzer line, is that unfortunately we're going to have to take some objectively bad positions, although practically it's a different story. Maybe we can hold, maybe we can hold, maybe we don't, but yeah, that's the risk that we have to take. So against this against this bishop d6 and all of these lines we've already covered. This bishop b4 move is already covered. Let's talk about bishop e4 here. Yeah, and rook d to d8 or rook d7, it doesn't really matter. The same story is gonna occur here after rook d8. Bishop b4, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, queen c7, attacking this e5 pawn. So bishop d6, queen b6, and there are a couple moves here again. King b1 was played by Zahar Efemenko against Peter Waltz in 2005, and I found after knight g6, queen f3, knight h4, which just played in the game, bishop takes h7 was played, which looks kind of like a fancy tactic, but we have nothing to worry about here. After taking here, we're just going to take back the pawn in g2. Rook d4 was chosen in the game after rook c8, b3, and then bishop h3 is a very, very nice move. Very nice defensive move here to prepare bishop f5, and the rook on d4 is hanging, so white cannot take the bishop. After king b2, bishop f5, rook c4, rook takes c4, queen c4, and queen f2. This could happen, and black actually, if anyone's better, it's going to be black, because they have some pressure on h2 and some pressure on c2 here, with a nice bishop on f5. But in this position, I think after rook takes c4, a draw was agreed. But yeah, black could definitely play on in this position. However, there's this move queen g4, after which we just kind of have to like try to repeat here. But maybe if white doesn't try to go for queen f3 in the repetition, then g3 is possible, preventing any knight h4. And here we can play queen b5, trying to how do you say it, like pride and prod or something like that, like prod and yeah, try to find some weaknesses in the position. And this is just attacking e5. So after queen f3, we can actually take on e5 here and get this simplified endgame after bishop e5, queen e5, bishop c6, bc6, queen c6, rook f8. And okay, white is more active here, but with basically no pieces left on the board, this should be a relatively routine draw. And so this king b1 move played is not really anything to worry about. Bishop c6 is the main move seen in many games. And the idea after queen c6, queen f3, trying to trade the queens off this way and connect the pawns. And after queen f3, gf3, knight g6, rook d4 is very insistent on pushing f4. But I like the move f6 here. And if e takes f6 happens, then I think we can get an equal game after gf6, rook b4, for example, b6. And I don't see a reason why black is worse here. With the king coming to f7, possibly e5, the king coming forward. Okay, you can analyze this yourself. And going back here, f4 is the main move, and after that we play rook d8, rook c4, rook d7, b4, and then a6 here, preventing any b5. After a4, king f7, b5 is white's best chance to try to win here. After ab5, and knight e7, trying to head to f5, king b2, fe5, fe5, And important here is to play h5 and try to get these pawns rolling as fast as possible with like g5 and like king g6. Because in a game played between Motilev and Miroshnichenko chose this knight f5 move, after which rook c8 was just actually killer here. Knight d6, ed6, and e5 here, because if you take, then there's rook c7. But after e5, there's this c4 move, which is very annoying because c5 is being threatened here to get some three connected pass pawns, or it's gonna be two connected pass pawns, but it's completely waiting. And after rook d6 happened, rook c7, king f6, rook takes b7, e4, rook b8, king e7. A weird thing happened here, like Motilev decided to repeat here into a draw, even though he was completely winning here with plus 1.7. Maybe he was low on time, or maybe there was a tournament situation thing kind of happening there. I'm not so sure. But best here is to play h5, and after king b3, g5, we're going to get a race here between the pawns on the h and g file and the pawns on the b and c file here. But the engine says that it's equal, and but obviously anything can happen here. We're going to play king g6 next, push the pawns up the board, and hopefully hold that position. So yeah, that covers this variation. This bishop takes c6, which is statistically the main move, but the engine recommends this queen f3 move. And unfortunately, the best I can offer is this bishop takes e4, queen e4, and rook c8. The best place for the rook, obviously. After b3, this knight d7 move. The reason that you don't play knight g6 in this position is because the e5 pawn is not really going to be attacked anytime soon. The queen on e4 and bishop e6 are covering it very well. So this knight is just misplaced, I found, after this sequence. Recommended by the computer, but it's obviously white is definitely better here. So instead of that, rook c8, b3, this knight d7 move is kind of important. And after king b2, queen f2 is a nice move to pressure some points in white's position here. And white cannot take on b7 here because the pawn on c2 is going to fall. So this is kind of annoying. After bishop b4 and knight b8, it prepares some like knight c6 ideas. And after a4, there's this important move a6. Because if we play knight c6, this is actually quite awkward for the queen after bishop e1, queen c5, rook d7, and this is not very pleasant. However, if we play a6 first, and then let's say rook d6, because we're still covering the d7 square here, so white needs to do something. So like rook d6, then we play h6, get some more useful moves in, cover the back rank, get some loot for the king. H3, knight c6, bishop c3, and rook c7. We're holding on here, but I can't say that it's a fantastic position. I can't like recommend this with a good conscience because I just don't believe in the position. However, black is still holding, so if this is the best that white can do after 32 moves, then I doubt that white is gonna know all of this theory. So I do recommend you try this line and maybe try to get some experience in it. I mean, there's some really good players that have lost the white side of this this variation. So I definitely don't think that it's like dead, at least from a human play perspective. So yeah. Okay, maybe going back, I want to discuss some of the alternatives here that I found, because I spent a lot of time on knight b6 and I just don't want to make all of the analysis in vain. So I'm also going to put this in the video part. So knight b6 is possible, and there are a couple of moves here. Bishop d3, I'm going to follow a game that I set up between Stockfish and itself, which continued rook fd8, and queen e3 is an important move. Because if queen g4 happens, then there's this rook takes d3, cd3, and bishop a4. Similar to the other variation, this bishop on a4 is actually supported by the knight, which makes this trap rook this position is completely fine according to the engine. And if they play b3, then a few good players have fallen into this trap. After queen a3, king b1, bishop b3, a b3, queen b3, king a1, queen a3, king b1, we can take the pawn with check, and let's say king a2. King a2 or king a1 are going to lead to the same story, where we're going to have this queen c2 move and then knight c4, bishop c1, and we have this check and the winning of the queen with knight a3. And in both variations after king a1, that's also going to happen here. Same deal there. So b3 is no good, obviously. How about this king b1 move? Then we just take on d1, and I think this is similar to the other variation that we just saw, except is there any difference? Yeah, maybe except the knight is actually on b6, and it's actually quite a bit better than it was on f8. So I guess that's one of the benefits if you have the knight on b6, is that it has some better prospects in the future. However, okay, there's just also this move bishop h6, after which we can play f5, which is the only move. After ef6, queen f6, attacking this guy and still putting pressure on this guy. Bishop d2, because bishop b5, bishop g5, we can play rook c8, I believe. After bishop d2, rook c8, king b1, bishop c2. It forces the king to a slightly less active square on a1. King a1, bishop d1, queen d1, knight d5, and already we have a good position here with a very nicely placed knight on d5, and we're preventing any bishop c3 ideas. And black can aim to trade off the rooks, for example, with like, yeah, we can just follow this continuation, and the position should be fairly balanced after a3, rook c6, rook f1, queen g6, queen f3, and queen f6. Yeah, rook c8 was chosen in the game between Vitaly Tshkovsky against Anand. So Anand played this move in a rapid game in 1993, and this is slightly inaccurate, but there's this queen f6 move, after which we trade off the pieces and get into an equal endgame. So yeah, this line I think is fine. The thing is that the queen d3 move prevents this rook takes d3 sacrifice, so we have to resort to other things. And knight a4 was chosen by Stockfish against Stockfish, and the idea is to play a knight c5 and remove the bishop from d3. After which queen h3, g6, because we need to defend h7 there. And after c3, rook d7, preparing to double up. Bishop c2, rook a d8, bishop h6. We can trade off the rooks here, and then play queen d8, bishop c2, knight b6, queen g3, prepares either h3 or h4 here. And after knight d7, turns out h4 is already a mistake here, because this knight d7 move is very crafty. Pressures this pawn, so queen a5 here with some counterplay against these two pawns. I found after queen g5, we need to play f6 here to prevent the check. Takes, and then we just take on g5 and then take on g2, and this is a equal endgame, as you see here. But then h3 is a different story. We can play queen e7 here, activating the queen. a3, bishop d5, h4, queen c5, queen g5, queen g1, bishop d1, and then f6. Like literally every other move is +7, +9, and f6 is the only move that can stop the queen infiltrating here. And after ef6, king f7, this position is fairly safe. Queen e3, queen g2, queen f4, e5, queen b4, knight f6, queen d6, king f1, queen f1, and after queen takes e5, bishop f3. Stockfish saw nothing better to do but go for the draw here with a bunch of queen checks. So yeah, that's what could happen if if this line was chosen with bishop d3. The next move I want to talk about is bishop e3. In my opinion, it's kind of hard to break, but there are a couple of moves that I've tried here. Bishop d5, let's see, just like king b1, rook fc8, bishop d5, knight d5, and c4, knight b4, queen g4. I've tried to find like queen f8, a3, knight c6, bishop c3, and okay, this is definitely slightly better for white. And the knight on c6 maybe you could argue is better than it was on g6, so I guess that's like it's kind of a plus, I guess you could say. And this should be it's not the most pleasant thing to play, but it's definitely playable. However, rook fc8 here is the main move, as you can see in the database here. After this, rook e3 is a novelty as far as I know in the master database on the chess, but queen g4 is the main move. After which we play bishop d5 and king b1, and we kind of get a similar position, but maybe we can play a5 in this position, try to get some a4 action in. But rook e3 is the move recommended by the engine, the top choice, and it just prepares rook g3. After bishop d5, rook g3, bishop takes b3, a b3, knight d5, bishop h6, provoking g6, rook f3, queen c5 here. The best I could find in this position is after c3, queen d4, rook d4, a5, bishop g5, b5, king b1, a4, c4, bc4, bc4, knight b6, rook c3, king f8, bishop e3, rook a b8, king a2, king e8, rook h4, h5, and h3. After this long sequence, white is slightly better. The engine says plus 0.63 at a higher depth, and I really just don't like playing against this pass pawn on the c file. So just from a practical perspective, the reason that I don't recommend this knight b6 move is because of this, of the trouble that I've found like in dealing with this bishop b3 move. Additionally, there's also this bishop f1 move, which historically has been the main move. Just the bishop is safeguarding itself here, not blocking the e file, and at some point after queen g4, the bishop will redeploy itself to the d3 square. And after rook f d8, queen g4, rook ac8, king b1, rook d5, which is an interesting move. I found after bishop d3, g6, because we're gonna have to play this move sooner or later after bishop h6 comes, so why not now? Bishop h6, bishop b5, bishop e4, rook d to c5, h4, knight a4, h5, rook c4, rook d6, bishop c6, queen f3, bishop e4, rook e4, rook e4, queen e4, b5, a3, knight c5. So this is following a game between two players, and then like knight c5, queen b4, a6, queen c3, queen c7, queen f3, queen e7. And after this exchange, white actually just managed to win here after queen c8, with queen h8 coming next move. Which is why, like this, I just don't like having this kind of allowing this bishop to stay alive on this diagonal kind of deal. Which is why I think knight f8 is the main move chosen by far, because there are some technical problems that we deal with when we bring the knight to b6, and it's not defending our king side. So yeah. That covers the move knight b6 as an alternative. So that covers the first of 4 chapters that I've made on this bishop e7 classical Sicilian on the Richter-Rauzer. Let me take my breath for a second. And so yeah, that's the biggest chapter by far in like the 4 chapters that I've made here. And so next one I just want to talk about the 11th move sidelines that white can choose, as well as the move 9 alternatives. So on move 9, we can make different decisions, and on move 11, white can make different decisions there. So I want to cover this after we get the position queen d2, bishop e7, castles, f4, and here, instead of knight takes d4, what about the other moves? Like, you may be thinking, why not a6? And like, or why not h6, or why not e5? So we're gonna cover that one by one. Let's turn on the engine here. And e5 is already not a good move because of this move knight f5. And after bishop takes f5, e5, queen a5, which is the best move. King b1, rook f8, g4 here. I think already we can see that if white can get away with playing g4, then this is already something terrible has gone wrong. And after ef4, bishop f4, knight takes g4, rook g1, knight to e5, bishop h6. Even though Jan Timman managed to win this game, this is completely winning for white already. I don't want to go into depth any further after g6 because, I mean, come on, black is getting destroyed in that position. But after h6, okay, h6 is possible, but let's talk about a6, another bad move. This is first seen in Keres versus Sabo in the USSR-Hungary match in Budapest 1955, a very long time ago. And there's this move e5, okay, we just played this game, and after which de5, there's this knight c6, bc6, fe5, and after knight d7, h4. White is just significantly better here. Black has a shattered pawn structure, and white has great attacking chances. Possibly rook h3, g3, or like, or h5, h6. So many moves just look so good look attractive for black there, for white there, sorry. Let's talk about h6 here. And there are a bunch of moves that white can play here, but I think after h4, again, we can take on d4 and transpose to the line after, I think, queen a5 here. But yeah, I can't say that I recommend this position, like king b1, rook d8. But it's definitely, like, it looks borderline playable. So if you remember the theory of this variation, you could possibly play it. With here, I think d5 is already very good for for black. So yeah, h6 is maybe possible. You can dig further into that, but there are other moves that you need to find out. Like for example, bishop f6. It just doesn't give white anything. After bishop f6, knight c6, bc6, queen d6, and queen b6, we have typical counterplay with rook d8 coming, and we have some pressure over here. So for example, queen d3, rook b8, b3, rook d8, queen f3, bishop d4 is a nice move, threatening bishop e3, possibly. After bishop c4, queen b4, rook d3, we can give this queen a3 check, and okay, c5 was played by Ivan Popov versus David Navarra in the 2015 European Rapid, which is actually just a bad move after knight b1. A surprising move, but yeah, if white found this move, then he would have been better here. But queen a3 is best, and after king b1, queen b4, king c1, repetition is best here. I think if possible, I mean, if you want to play on, then we can play queen c5 here. Yeah, and try to play further, but that is not it's not recommended. So yeah. So bishop f6 doesn't give white anything. How about this knight c6 move? After bc6, okay, I didn't cover this variation too much because it's not so critical, but after this variation, we can play queen b6 with some typical counterplay here. There's e5, queen d3, or queen d2. You probably need to know all of them if you want to play this variation, but it's not so critical. And after bishop h4, I think we can take on d4 here and then play a6. Yeah, this variation is quite complicated still, so it isn't exactly avoiding any theory if you want to do that. Queen a5 transposes to the line where we play queen a5 first and then h6. After bishop c4, e5, fe5, d5, queen d3, bishop g4. Okay, we see something similar here. Like, okay, bishop 6, rook df1, queen c5, king b1, bishop h4, a3, a6, bishop a2, rook d8, knight d5, rook d7, h3, bishop e6, rook f3, king h8, rook d1, rook f to d8, queen e2, b5, rook d3, or rook f to d3, bishop takes d5. Okay, and white is definitely better here with massive control over the d5 square, and this bishop is not looking very comfortable, but okay, this is something that you possibly want to research. And Shanklin won this game against Ivan Popov in 2015, where bishop d5 was played, which is just not a good move after bishop d5 here. Too much control, too much power over this position here. So queen a5 is possible, but a6, let's talk about this. There are a couple of moves here. I mean, there's many moves, like bishop c4, let's just see, bishop b3, yeah, okay, bishop b3, queen c7, and like this could happen where we play queen a7 here, which is a very interesting move. And queen d3 is very interesting. White has a pawn, but black has a bishop pair compensation. And also the queenside play already has initiated here. And this was chosen in the game between Yermolinsky and Dmitry Gurevich. And bishop e7 seems to be the best move recommended by the engine. But b4 was chosen in the game, and after which e5, bc3, ef6, bc2, king b2, gf6, rook h1, and then queen f2 was just a blunder here after rook e3. Black is getting crushed. So yeah, that's what happened. But bishop e7 is seems to be fine, says the computer, with like bishop b7, maybe bishop e7, maybe bishop c5, maybe b4, and then a5, a4, and play can continue on there. But here, bishop e5 was chosen by Smirin against Alexander Fishbein in 1992. And after rook d8, queen b4, bishop e7, rook takes d8, bishop d8, and rook d1. Bishop b7 continued, and after king b1, queen f2. Black actually put some serious pressure on this, on the g2 pawn, and Smirin eventually won the game, actually. A4 was chosen, and then like bishop g2, ab5, bishop f3, queen d4, queen h2, rook f1, bishop g2, rook g1, bishop h4, f5, bishop h3, and then f6 was chosen. So I think this, after bishop h3, and then fe6 is best to try to damage black's pawn structure, and white should be slightly better there. But f6 was chosen, and after g5, rook d1, ab5, yeah, ab5, and white should have no problem here. Knight d5 is recommended by the engine, but yeah, like something like knight b5 just would try to win the pawn, doesn't quite work because of bishop g3, and this e5 pawn is lost. It would have won black the e5 pawn after, like, yeah, rook e1 can't be played because of the bishop there. So yeah, that's what could have happened. Very interesting lines here with after queen a7. Yeah, but then again, you need something like g4, and it's not easy. So I do recommend just like following the analysis that I've given in the main lines, and you can possibly check the BGN out yourself for all the rest of these variations, which I will not talk about because that's way too much. So yeah, let's talk about knight 64, queen d4, queen a5, and then here I think we've talked about this, right? Yeah, bishop c4 is the main move. Okay, so we haven't covered the other. No, wait, actually we have. Yeah, we definitely have covered the other main moves. So I guess we should move on to the next one. I'm not really ready. Wait, am I ready to move on? Yeah, I guess I am. Okay. Okay, I guess we'll just go to the next variation, where we talk about the mainline 10 alternatives. So after here, instead of queen a5, there are other moves that we can play. There's the move bishop d7, which is no good. There's move h6, which is also no good. And there's this move a6, which is another move known to theory. I think it's not as bad as other options. Let's talk about bishop d7 here for a bit. Bishop f6 can happen, and after bishop f6, queen d6, bishop c6, we get, it looks like we get the similar, yeah, like Rauzer compensation here with the bishop pair and like with these two bishops, notably on f6 and c6. But after queen d8, rook f d8, bishop b5, bishop c3, bishop takes c6, bishop takes b2, king b2, and bc6 here, rook takes c8, king d8, and king c3. Surprisingly, I mean, this is a different story altogether because the king is so active on c3, and in this game between Navarra versus Jabava in 2016 in the 17th European Individual Championships, Navarra won this game, which is unsurprising after this bishop d7 move is played. So how about this h6 move? This was tried by Rajabov against Carlsen, and it can transpose to many other games also. Again, the reply h4 and then like going for queen a5 is kind of the reason that I would try to avoid this. Yeah. H4 and then the other. There's also possible. I mean, it's also possible to play like bishop h4, but and after queen a5, e5, which is chosen in the game between Carlsen and Rajabov. D e5, queen e5, takes, knight e5. We get a similar variation here after we trade here, and then knight c6 was chosen, but I think b6 and then like going for the same things like bishop e4, rook b8. It should be, yeah, it should be equal. But knight c6 doesn't seem to be best objectively there. Yeah, that transposes easily to the other variation. But here h4, there's this move hg5, which is in a very exciting game between Anand and Kasparov. Kasparov chose this move. I don't know how far he saw, but this move is very, very risky. After hg5 and hg4, there's this queen d2 move, which seems to be best here. There's this also bishop e2 move played in the game that I just mentioned, and I think that also gives white some decent chances. But there's a very interesting line that happens after that. Queen e2, just know that this is the best move. But bishop e2, at the end of this insanely long variation, black can hold a fortress against the white queen, with like the rook and a bishop, if I'm not mistaken. So let's just follow this line after e5, defending the knight. Queen g1, ef4, bishop takes g4, bishop takes g4, queen h2, threatening mate. So f5 is the only move. After queen h7, king f7, rook h6 was chosen in the game, but I think e takes f5 is best. And after, okay, maybe let's just talk about rook h6 first, played by Anand, and rook g8 here is the best move. But in the game, bishop takes g5 was played. Rook g8 is best move, and this leads to a draw after like e5, and the king f8 is kind of an insane move. And after e6, queen e8, defending the f7 square, knight e5, gh6, g6, rook takes g6, queen h8, rook g8, queen h6, rook g7, and eventually at the end of the day, white can force the repetition there. So that's what happens after rook h6. Yeah, I just want to show that move because it's good for historical context. But e takes f5 is objectively the best. After bishop g5, queen g6, king g8, queen h7, king f7, white can just go for the draw here, which is chosen by many other players. But knight e4 continues, and after f3, king b1, fg2, queen g6, king g8, knight g5, bishop f5, covering the h7 square, queen h5, and unfortunately black is going to have to give up the queen here, but under good circumstances after g takes h1 queen, rook h1, and queen g5, excuse me, queen g5, rook ac8, king a1, rook takes c2, queen e7, rook fc8, b3, rook 2 to c7, queen takes d6, rook c1 takes. So yeah, apparently king b2 is best here. Okay, maybe I'm finding an improvement on the spot here. The computer seems to really like this, and maybe this variation is just not good. But I just want to show that in this game played in, I think maybe, I'm not sure if this is a correspondence, but no, it's actually an open tournament in 2016. A surprising thing happened here, where black managed to get a fortress actually in this line. Surprisingly, like this is just a fortress, and the engine even agrees, which is very cool. But king b2 seems to win for white, so I'm not going to recommend this at all. So yeah, I mean, obviously I don't recommend like taking on g5 at all, but just yeah, it's interesting to know. Yeah, this queen d2 move seems to be best, but obviously bishop e2 also seems to be winning for white. Queen d2, there's e5 move, and after g3, g6, rook h5, king g7. This is some analysis provided, in the video that Jan Victor Gunnarsson made, international master, a very experienced player. I think he made a video and he showed this line. I'll leave the link as per usual in the comments, in the description below, so you can watch that. After bishop e2, knight f2, rook f1, knight h3, knight d5, and knight takes g5. Yeah, white is already better here, but knight takes g5 is kind of a trick, but a trick white is hoping for. But like they're hoping for, black is hoping for knight e7, queen e7 here, and then like bishop e6, where okay, white is slightly better, but black is gonna get in rook h8 and should be holding on for, in the meantime. However, there's this insane move f5. And after bishop f6, rook h1, rook f to h1, rook g8, and this line, yeah, fg6, bishop c4. Essentially, white is just completely winning here. Bishop e6, knight f6, and this d6 pawn is going to fall, right? Or not even that, apparently. What is happening here? Queen g5, of course. Yeah, okay. So I guess, yeah, this f5 moves is pretty insane, but also very, very nice. Yeah, so that's why taking on g5 is no good, and why you should be very, very afraid of ever weakening the position with h6 here. a6 is possible. And let's see after bishop e2. This is a quiet but poisonous variation. b5 is a mistake here because of it could lead to bishop. Okay, I mean bishop f3 is possible, but engine really seems to like e5 here. Okay, so that's interesting that you could try to find it yourself, because I'm not prepared for that. But there's a bishop c4 move after b5. Okay, we can get our typical counterplay here with bishop b3 and queen c7, I guess. And kind of getting out of theory here, but that's an approach that you can try to take. Just be careful about the tactical opportunities of white ever playing e5 or f5 or any of these surprising moves. So yeah, I think that's the 10th move alternatives. Black can play either like bishop d7, h6, or a6. A6 definitely better than the rest of them. And for the final chapter, let's talk about the bishop e7 sidelines. Here. Okay, this is a lot of stuff. f3 is, I think knight b3 is, okay, I just want to talk about this for a bit before entering the actual variations. Um, I've seen a game between Hubner and Kasparov in this line, and I think this is a very serious variation that white can employ, although there are some surprising moves that black needs to know to be able to equalize. So that's the gist that I'm getting from some of these variations. Let's talk about bishop f6 first. After bishop f6, knight c6, bc6, queen e6, queen b6, and again, we get our typical compensation here with the b file and the strong bishop on f6. After, let's say, queen g3, defending f2, we can play rook b8, b3, and queen a5. This is a very surprising move, yes, sacrificing the rook, and knight a4 was one of my considerations here in this position, looking at least from a human perspective. And the reason this is not good is because of this move rook b4, threatening to take here on e4, or possibly on a4 also. After c4, rook takes a4, b4, and c5. Prepares to bring the bishop to d4, play e5, maybe bishop e7, and the structure is just horrible for white. So this is actually just already much better for black after this. And if queen takes b8 happens, there's this move bishop e5, attacking the queen first. Very important to, I think, take control of the f4 square also, and also not allow the queen to escape so freely. Specifically because if we play something like queen a, like bishop c3 here, I think there's rook d3. No, there's bishop c3, and like king b. Was it king b1? No, was it queen d6? Something like a4, and then like queen c5, queen d6. Yeah, this one. So that's what we want to avoid. That's why we play bishop e5 first, and after queen a8, we play bishop c3. Yeah, okay. So the engine already says that queen e5 is best to give up the queen, but obviously that is not good for white. So after queen e8, bishop c3, rook d3, bishop e5 is a nice move. And now we're threatening here, and then like bishop e2. So queen e1, bishop e2. So black should be just winning in this attack. So that's a surprising thing to know about this like rook sacrifice. This, yeah. So yeah, that's possible. And how about this knight db5 move? So yeah, this knight db5 move is an interesting way, and it's an interesting way of targeting the d6 pawn. And the important move after queen a5, discovered, it discovered over 50 years ago. After bishop f6 and bishop f6, knight d6, rook d8, f4, there's this e5 move, very important to prevent white from ever pushing e5. If you play bishop c3 here, queen c3, queen a2, e5, this knight on d6 is very strong and can be removed. So that's not what we want to do. However, if we play e5 here, there's this move queen d5, which is the main move. We play queen c7, don't worry about it, f5, and then knight d4 here. And yeah, I thought of this exchange sacrifice of rook takes d4, but I mean, it just doesn't work. e4 and knight cb5, queen e7, bishop c4, a6, queen f7, knight f7, ab, bishop e3, and rook d7, knight g5, king h8, and this seems to be winning for black. So knight db5 is the move to try to get to equality, I guess. And after queen a5, there are two moves here that I've analyzed, and they're the only moves that don't lose, which is queen c5, which is the top engine move. After which we play a6 and b4 here, and b6 here, counterattack. Queen takes d4, ed4, ba5, ab5, knight d5, rook takes a5, knight f6, gf6, bishop d3, and a game between Gromodka, who was rated 23-16 against Mostovic, who was rated 22-64, and it continued after rook takes a2 here, and the game ended in draw. But I like this move bishop d7 here, protecting the b5 pawn. The a2 pawn is still under attack, so we're gonna have some pressure here. We're gonna play king f8 to e7, and hopefully, this should be a draw. After king b2, rook king f8, rook hf1, rook d8, rook a1, and rook a4. Black definitely has these slightly preferable side of this endgame, with possibly king e7, king here, and then bring the king to e5. I really like this position. And instead of that queen c5 move, there's also queen c4, and here there's this insane bishop takes f5 move, which is played first by Boleslavsky versus Korchnoi in the USSR Championships in Moscow, 1952. And the idea is obviously just to bring the rook to c8, and b4 is possible here, but after queen b6, ef5, rook ac8, knight a4, because I think the queen doesn't have anything. Like queen d3 looks awful. Is knight b3 just winning? No, knight takes b5 is just winning. Okay, so yeah, that's very good. But after knight a4, rook takes e4, knight b6, bishop g5. Yeah, king b2, rook takes b4, king c3, bishop e7. A very, very surprising move. Yeah, just the knight on b6 is trapped, and black is completely winning here. So yeah, some very counterintuitive moves, but black is winning there. And if e takes f5, then after rook ac8, queen d3 is no good because of bishop g5, king b1, and knight takes b5, queen b5, rook takes d1, knight takes d1, and queen d2, threatening some points here. After a3, queen c2, king e2, queen takes d1. Black is winning here. Queen b7, there's rook c1 with crushing effect, and the queen can give a check with bishop d8, just wins. And if g3 happens here, trying to prepare bishop g2, then after e4, getting the pawn out of danger, bishop g2 and queen c2. Let's say queen b7, rook e8, queen b5, rook d8, bishop h3, bishop f6. Either h5 or g6 is going to come to secure the back rank, and this is completely winning for black because of the strong central pass pawn. Even though this is equal material, this is completely winning. Black is just so much better. So this bishop f takes f5 move is something to note. Queen a4, okay, yeah, queen a4 here is best, and the engineer suggests that this is equal after queen takes a4, knight a4, and then knight b3. After a b3, bishop g5, rook d2, which is forced because if king b1, then you lose the rook with check, and then rook takes e2. This is completely busted. But if you play rook d2, and then a6 is an important move. Bishop d2 here, and then like a6, knight bc3 is less clear because white has two pieces for the rook, so we do need to be careful still. And there's this a6 move after knight c3. We take on d2 here, and okay, I guess we can transpose to the through that line, but we can play b5 here, knight b6, and rook takes c3. After bc3, bishop c3, we are threatening a checkmate here on d1. So there's bishop d3, bishop d4, attacking this guy. After knight c4, because the knight is indeed trapped, a nice way of using geometry here. Knight c4, bc4, bc4, king f8. This should at the very least be equal, if not slightly better for black because of this these double c pawns, and king e7 is coming next. So that covers this line very extensively. Of knight db5 there. How about h4 here? h4 here is interesting. White does not play f4, which is kind of strange. But this was chosen, I think, in one game. Yeah, so Short versus Kasparov. Kasparov won this game. Also, Miguel Santos Ruiz played this against Nakamura, Arkady Naidich, Anton Demchenko, some very strong players. And I didn't find anything better than to take on d4, queen d4, and queen a5 here. Some other moves like, okay, after h4, like bishop d7 is no good, knight db5, and there's some problems on d6. And with the queen on there, like this is similar to the variation with the queen actually on d3. I wish I could drag the queen up the board one square just to show, but in the queen d3 line, which is quite a new line recommended by some of the strongest like Lee lines, those kind of neural network engines, the difference is that if the queen was on d3 instead of d2, knight db5 would have been met with knight e5. So if you imagine the queen is on d3, knight e5 would have been an additional resource that black can use to get out of that situation with a weak d6 pawn. However, in this queen d2 line, this is just no good. This is just better for for white. Sorry. If h6 happens here, then after knight c6, bc6, and e5, this is again some of the analysis by Jan Victor Gunnarsson. This is no good. After hg5, there's ef6, bishop f6, hg5, bishop g5, and f4. After bishop h6, g4, white is completely winning here. And if d e5, then there's bishop h6. If we take on d2 first, okay, we don't want to take because takes, rook h3, g3 is coming. So let's say queen d2, bishop d2, knight g4. Then there's after knight e4, f5. Okay, we're threatening this guy, so knight e4, then f5 is no good because f3. And if we take on e4, then after this exchange, we have triple central pawns, no good. Already almost plus 4 here. And after knight f6 here, there's knight g5, putting some pressure on the position. Knight d5 here, bishop c4, bishop f6, rook h1. And this is a lot better for white. With all of the active pieces, the bishop pair, and this pawn structure is just awful. Yeah. So yeah, there's also possible knight d5 here, but after rook h3, a very nice move. F5 is kind of forced. There's this bishop g5 move, after which rook b8, knight a4, rook e8, and rook g3 happened in the game Arno Nickel against Livio Niagu. Yeah, this is played in 2010. Arno Nickel is a correspondence chess grandmaster from Germany. I visited his store in Berlin actually a few times over the years. Bought many books. Yeah, I'll probably make a video on like my chess book haul. It's a lot of fun and I love his store. Do visit if you're in Berlin. Anyways, back to the video. Rook g3 is actually best instead of this bishop g5 move, which is chosen by Arno Nickel. Rook g3, after bishop f6, bishop g5, e4, bishop f6, queen f6, and h5. Either h6 is going to come or white is going to play rook g6 to deadly effect. And so that is no good. So this h6 move is very bad because of that e5, knight c6 and the e5 response. At d5, I couldn't find equality here after ed5, knight d5, knight d5, ed5, bishop takes e7, queen e7, and queen f4 here. I want to stop here because I just don't think that's... It doesn't look so theoretical, but black can't be equal here. With queen on f4, h4 to include h5, possibly rook h2 is not possible, but you can see the position is just optically very good for white. And let's talk about a6 here. The concrete line that follows doesn't give black enough compensation, which is quite surprising. After bishop f6, bishop f6, knight c6, bc6, queen d6, queen b6, it looks like it's very similar to the previous position. Like with the queen on b6, we play rook b8, get our typical counterplay, yada yada, equalize. But here is different. There's this very strong move, queen g3, going back, and this is the only move that can wreck black's plan here. The queen is actually just defending the knight on c3, and black doesn't have enough compensation here despite the open b file and the strong bishop on f6. After rook b8, b3, queen a5, queen takes b8, bishop e5, queen a7, bishop c3. So yeah, maybe this is similar to the other line actually, but queen a7, bishop c3, rook d3, c5 here, very important. Rook h to h3, trying to attack this guy. There's this queen a3 move, king d1, and then bishop a5. After c3, c4, rook d2. We're following a game here. Already in this position, black is in really bad shape. After cb3, bishop c4, bishop takes c3, rook c3 and b2. Rook takes a3, b1 equals queen, queen e2, king e2, queen e4, queen e3, queen takes c4, rook a to d3, bishop b7, queen d4, and bishop d5. I just can't find equality here after these falling moves. a4, a5. Okay, so in this position, white is already better, and the game between Fred Kunzelman and Antonio Sanchez Rodenas, apologies for butchering that name, played just 2 years ago, 2020. And after a4, a5, queen c4, rook c4, rook d4, rook d4, rook d4, king h7. I don't know why, but I think a draw was agreed here or something like that, which I really don't understand, but okay. Anyways, that's what happened, but yeah, this line is just no good, in my opinion. I just don't think white has enough, black has enough compensation in that line, specifically because of the queen g3 move defending the knight. And yeah, knight takes d4 is obviously the main move that we discussed. And I think we've covered everything actually in this variation. Yeah, have we? I guess we haven't discussed this yet. Rook d8. Okay, so from before, yeah, with the h4 line, I guess we have this knight takes d4 move, and after queen d4, queen a5, trying to get like it looks very similar to the previous position, but imagine if this pawn was on f4 and the pawn on h2, then that would be the main line, right? But this is different, and after, for example, king b1, rook d8 here, and queen d2, which is the most played move. This threatens knight d5 again to try to get the bishop pair, and so here I recommend the move queen c7 here, and after f3, a6, bishop d3, b5, knight e2. It's kind of hard to stop white from pushing g4, and then maybe bishop f6, and g5. And white's attack is very fluid. Meanwhile, black is not going to be pushing at this pawn anytime soon. a5 can the pawn can be taken. So I don't think that this equalizes. Bishop b7, g4 already is better for white. So just stick to the main lines, to be honest. That's the most reliable, I would say. Yeah, but maybe yeah, okay, d5 is no good still. Yeah, but maybe that's kind of like what we should do. Bishop d7 move is possible, but I don't think it equalizes either. Let's say like king b1, bishop c6, f3, queen c7, knight b5. Very nice move, takes, and maybe a6, bishop d3, and b5 can be played, but after g4, the situation is very similar to the one before that we saw. So I kind of find difficulty like trying to see what I should recommend against this line. Give me a second here. So yeah, after some digging, the computer seems to really like a6 here, and then going to the line that I just discussed here. Even though I said that there was not enough compensation, but the computer says that this is possibly like the best line that black can hope for here, which is kind of sad, but okay. I mean, it is what it is. cb3 and bishop c4, and then taking on c3. Yeah, it is what it is. I guess you just gotta play this and accept this, and maybe avoid the queen exchange is what I would suggest. But yeah, that's the possible line that could happen. I just want to keep moving forward here. Instead of h4, there's this king b1 move also. It could transpose to many things after queen d4 here, and then there's also this knight e4 move. After knight e4, bishop g5, knight g5, queen g5, queen d6, and bishop d7. White cannot take on d7 because of rook d8, and okay, this should be equal here actually, because the bishop is going to come to c6 perhaps. If queen g3, we can take, and then play bishop c6. h4, we can play queen f6. Otherwise, we can get bishop c6 and get a fine position here. Let's talk about knight b3. It's a very serious move. This was first played by Allegan in 1936. It threatens bishop takes f6 and just immediately to win the pawn. And white opens the d file, threatens to capture the knight on f6, either winning d6 or ruining our pawn structure. And if you personally want to avoid this situation, then you can just take on d4 first, and then avoid any of this knight b3 nonsense. And here there are many moves that have been tried in the past. a5. So this move was chosen by Kasparov against Karpov in 1985, and the critical variation is after a4, d5. So yeah, this was chosen by Kasparov, and the problem is that it looks active, but it kind of makes the position loose after bishop b5. And this was first put into practice by Mikhail Tal, also suggested by the Latvian IM Alvis Vitalinch. After knight e4, d4, and d4, queen d8, bishop d8, takes. There's this knight d2 move, and surprisingly, it's quite difficult to move this bishop. Develop in f5. There's possibly just knight c4, and let's say f5, knight c4, knight f7, rook h1. Black's bishop is really having trouble to get into the game, and so yeah, black is significantly worse here, which is why this d5 move is no good, and this a5 plan is also just no good. But Karpov didn't find that, and let's move to d5 here. The simplifications in the center really just favor white, so I don't recommend this. There's ed5, knight e5, bishop e7, knight e7, queen d8, rook d8, bishop e2, b6, rook takes e8, knight takes d8, rook d1, bishop e7, g3, king f8, knight b5, and white has all the active play here with knight d2 to c4, and black is just forced to suffer in this position. Knight d6 is also a possibility that can come, and I don't want to recommend this at all. there's also the move a6 here. But after bishop f6, we have to take on f6 with the pawn, unfortunately. And it's still this was chosen by in a famous game by Short versus Karpov in their match, 1992, game 10 in the candidates final, where Karpov was put into a must-win situation, but lost badly here after queen h6, king h8, I think queen h5, rook g8. Was it this, or kind of forgetting which one? I think it was like f4 or something like that. Maybe h4. Yeah, I think h4, and then g4, g5, and Karpov lost badly there. Because this is definitely not a Karpov style, and I think he was just forced in that situation in the candidates final. So kind of tough situation there, but essentially queen h6 I think is one of the best moves. King h8, queen h5, rook g8, and objectively it's not terrible. It's playable, says the computer. But after queen f7, rook g6, f4, bishop d7. Let's say king b1, because if rook d3 happens, then there's f5, which is a very nice move. And after ef5, bishop e8, it just traps the queen, because the rook is defending the e6 pawn now. Takes, queen f8, rook h3, queen f7, bishop d3, queen f4, move over, queen e5 is a nice move. Rook h7, king g8, knight d2, and this is very sharp. And black is, I would say black is on the definitely not in the driver's seat here, because white has all the attacking potential, although it's not that clear. So this is very interesting. However, king b1 here, queen b6, f5, rook f8, take on g6, take on f7, knight e5, and this should be slightly better for black here, but it's quite dynamic, and I wouldn't count white out of this game quite yet. So yeah, a6 is possible, definitely. And how about queen d6 here? Yeah, this is the main move, and I just want to cover the main some of the sidelines here. First off, f4, we can play rook d8, very standard. Bishop e2, h6, and if h4 happens, then we can play d5 here, a break in the center. e5, knight e4, takes, queen c3, rook takes d1, bishop d1, bishop f8, here, and then this bishop is actually trapped here, so we shouldn't be on the rush to take it, because there's possible queen h3, but it's on the back burner here. After queen g3, a5, I just threatening a4, bishop takes h6, a4, knight d2, a3, b3, and knight b4. White is just significantly better here, if not outright winning, because of the weakened dark squares here. Knight c4, queen d4 already looks very, very good for black. So that's what happens if h4. If bishop h4, then we have the standard trick with knight takes e4 with the tempo on the queen, and after the knight recaptures, then we're going to take this guy on h4. And if bishop takes f6, then after bishop f6 and g4, a5, a4, queen b4, black's attack is actually faster here. Taking on c3 and taking on a4 is a serious threat, and black should be better there. That's what happens if f4 there. What about bishop f6? Then we can just take on f6 and we get our typical compensation. Queen takes d6 cannot be played because queen takes f2, and this is a very common trick because this pawn on f2 is hanging, which is why white typically plays f3 there, which is the main line. This bishop is immensely strong, and white does not want to go into this. Knight a4 is an inaccuracy here because of queen c7, and if queen takes d6, there is a very surprising move here. Bishop g5 first, kicking the king away. After king b1, rook d8, sacrificing the queen here, because if you take, then there is going to be mate. So that can't be played, and white is just busted here. So after knight a4, queen c7, and f4, I think just rook d8 here, and black should be better here. This knight on a4 is quite misplaced. Next, we can possibly play a6 and b5, get a lot of tempi here against these awkward knights. And against, let's see, h4 here, we can play rook d8 again, and h5. So black needs to stop this h6 advance, so we can play h6 here. After bishop e3, play queen c7, and we're going to play d5 next move. Let's just say, for example, f4, then we can play d5. Okay, a6 is possible, and let's just say bishop e2, b5, but bishop f3, d5 e5 here, and it's less clear in this position, which is why I kind of want to avoid this one. Like with g4, it's kind of scary, so I just want to recommend d5, a break in the center, and after e5, there's knight e4. Knight takes e4 leads to d4, queen e1, rook takes d1, queen d1. After bishop d7, a3, I don't see why black should be any worse here. For example, a move like rook d8, I don't see why it is bad. Is there any reason? No, but something like, yeah, the engine also recommends knight a5 here, takes, and the bishop can't be taken because of queen e1 check. So that's also a possibility here, knight a5. And instead of that, if knight b5 happens, stacking the queen, then queen b8, queen e1, f6 is a nice move, undermining the center. Bishop d3, fe5, bishop takes e4, de4, queen g3, rook f8, f takes e5, queen takes e5, queen takes, knight c7, knight g4, attacking this bishop, bishop g1, rook b8, bishop takes e7, and knight f2. And this is an insane line, because the counterplay that we get for this entire rook that we sacrifice is going to win us material back eventually. After bishop takes b8, there's this e5 move. Very, very surprising. And look at the engine. It just says it's 0-0s. The light square bishop is going to enter the game. And let's say, for example, bishop a7. We can play bishop g5 check. King b1, knight takes d1, takes, and then e3. And this pass pawn is going to be very strong. Let's say knight c1. We can play bishop g4. Rook e1, and then e2 here. They cannot take because takes, then there's going to be a back rank problem. So knight takes e2, bishop d2. Also, this is the recommended line. I think with bishop d2, is there... Yeah, there's probably some knight e6 tricks. Here in the position. So bishop d2, rook h1, bishop takes, knight d5, rook f1 takes, and eventually in this endgame, all of white's pawns on the king side here are shattered. These two pawns are going to be weak, and they're going to be definitely scooped up very soon. So black is on the better end of this endgame. So that is what can happen. So remember that you can get this d5 break in this specific variation. Let's talk about bishop e3 here. Queen c7. This is not very critical. It was tried by Karpov once in 1979 against Sosonko, but I'm not really sure. This possibly can just transpose to the other variation after f3 and rook d8 here, and yeah, this can definitely transpose to bishop e3, queen c7. So let's talk about this first, and then sorry about that. After rook d8, as you can see here, there are many games that have gone down. Like Kramnik has played this, Anand has played this, Boris Afruk, Boris Gulko, all of the Borises, more Kramnik, even Kasparov against Hubner, which I mentioned before, in 1985, played there. And yeah, let's talk about a few moves here. King b1 is interesting. The idea is to avoid the check on f4 in the line where black plays d5 and bishop takes f6 happens. And this was chosen by Hubner against Kasparov. We can see later a comparison about why maybe this move was considered. After this, queen c7 is possible, but let's just cover a6, which follows the game. After bishop e3, queen c7, queen f2 tries to take advantage of the b6 square, so knight d7 is kind of forced here. And after f4, b5, g4, bishop b7, bishop g2 was played in the game, after which we actually can play b4 here. But rook ac8 was chosen in the game, which is not a good move because of g5. But b4 here is the best, and after knight a4, rook ab8, knight b6, bishop c8, and the computer says equality. It's kind of strange here, because after knight a4, bishop b7, the computer already recommends to repeat, and after knight here takes, I guess we get an a5, a4 very quickly, or we can possibly close off all of this counterplay with like playing e5. So that is possible. And if g5 here, which is the best move, then we can play knight a5, trying to trade off some of these knights. Knight a5, queen a5, bishop g2, knight c5. Knight e2, trying to get to g3 and f, and trying to push f5. And this is kind of the variation which I've had trouble finding like a solution of. But let's say rook ac8, knight g3, knight a4, rook d3, which follows the game here in the database. Knight c5 is an inaccuracy playing the game. Or maybe it's possibly the best move, but it's just not good after here. And then e5 was playing the game, fe5 to e5, knight f5, rook e8, rook d5 here is a very nice exchange sacrifice. After this exchange, queen c7, rook f8, h4. The bishop pair and white's pawn storm is going to be decisive here. Let's talk about another thing here. King b1 instead of king b1. There's this h4 move, which the problem is that it doesn't pay attention to black's threats here, and we have this move d5. And if bishop takes f6, and after bishop de4, very nice in between move. Bishop takes e7 is possible, but we just take on d2, and take here, knight d4, queen c7, knight b5, and queen f4 is a very nice move. And with this is the only move, but black has escaped the all of the dangers of the back rank here, and should be a lot better here with the material advantage. King b1, knight d5, f4, queen e4, bishop d3, queen f4, rook h to f1, queen b8 is nice, and black's completely winning here. So maybe, yeah, that is something that that white wants to avoid with the move king b1. Try to avoid that queen f4 check in that very long line. But let's say e5, knight d5, bishop e7. There's this move knight e7, and after bishop d3, e5 prepares bishop e6. And this position should be very, very healthy here. White's attack is not going to be... I'm not going to say... I don't think it's faster than black's counterplay also. So I think this is a very healthy position. So h4 I just don't think is a good move. But there's also this move bishop e3. And after queen c7, I guess we enter the variation that we saw before there. There's this move g4, but we can just break with d5. e d5, knight d5, knight d5, rook d5. Looks better for black. So... yeah, the engine there's apparently some theory after queen g2 here, and e4 and g5 I'm guessing, or okay, rook d8. Let's see this continuation together. fe4, and yeah, the position looks fine. Knight d7 or a6 and then b5. a6 b5 next is gonna come, maybe queen c7 back. The position looks very healthy here. And so g4, maybe knight b5 is possible, but we can play queen b8, queen f2, d5 here, break again in the center, takes, and bishop c5 is a mistake here already. Black is already better in this position, but bishop c5, we can just play bishop g5, king b1, and then a6 here. Let's say c4, because if you retreat back, then you're going to lose the rook on d1. So c4, ab, c takes, e takes d, bishop takes b5. And play the move d4 here, clearing the long diagonal to prepare bishop e6. After knight d4, bishop d4, there's also this move queen d6 here, which is very strong. After bishop d3, where we cannot take on here because there's a bishop takes h7, we can play queen d5 here to provoke b3, and it allows for some tactics here. There's this insane move, there's this queen takes d4 move, and the point is after bishop takes h7, takes, queen takes d4 and bishop f5. This is actually winning after king b2 and bishop f6 because b3 is provoked, which is why it's very important to play this queen d5 move. And the following line is very, very might shock your opponent if you play it on the board. So yeah, that's a possible line that could happen. And instead of knight b5, let's talk about queen f2 here. The nice thing is that we haven't played a6, so we're not forced to play knight d7 here and make somewhat of a passive concession. So we can break here with d5 immediately. After e5, knight d5, knight d5, rook d5, rook d5, e d5, g4, bishop e6, king b1. This position is quite playable and quite healthy. I think either knight e5, either bishop f6 or rook c8. Even some ideas of like a5 are possible. Yeah, I really like this position for black. You can just play on there. And instead of that, the immediate knight b5 move is the critical move. And here we need to play somewhat of a strange move, as you can see recommended by the engine. This first off this move just threatens bishop e3 to trap our queen. So be very careful. We need to play the move rook d7 here, which clears the d8 square for the queen. And there are a couple of moves. If bishop e3, which is the old recommendation, we can play queen d8, and knight 5 d4 is the best move. Knight 3 d4 is hit by d5, and after knight c6 bc6, let's say knight d4, then there's d4, and we're threatening c5, so queen e1, bishop e7, bishop e2, c5, knight b3, takes on f3, bishop takes, c4, knight d4, rook c8, and next move we're going to play knight d5 and play bishop f6, and we're only up one pawn, but the c pawn is like very valuable in attacking black's position, in attacking white's position here. So this is very, very bad news for team white. And so e5 here is possible, but we just take on b5, ef6, bishop f6, and bishop takes b5 is a horrible blunder because of rook b7, and the b2 pawn is being skewered here. c4, queen c7, king b1, a6, just wins. Bishop a4, bishop a4 just take on b2, I guess, with the rook. So yeah, knight 3 d4 is like really, really bad. So knight 5 d4 is the best move, and here best is to play a5 to threaten a4, and this is Cotronius's recommendation, and the counterplay that we get with a4 is very, very strong here. So after a4, black actually managed to provoke the weakness of the b4 square in white's position. So next we can play e5 here to prepare d5 next move, because we are stopping white from ever playing e5 themselves. And so let's say knight f5, we can break with d5 immediately. And this looks already very promising. After knight e7, queen e7, and we can see that we can actually essentially almost like take on e4 here and unleash the rook on the queen. And let's see, after bishop c5, there's queen e8. And there are a couple moves here. E d5 is just not very good after rook d5, bishop d3. And there's this very strong move, b5. So bishop d3 is actually inaccurate, queen e1 is best, after which we can just develop with bishop f5. I don't see what's wrong with that. But after bishop d3, there's this very nice move, b5 here, with which Jan Victor Gunnarsson, who made one of the classical Sicilian videos that I use as a reference of the series, he played b6 here, which is a missed opportunity. There's this insane move b5. After ab5, there's a4 with advantage. And a sample line could go, because if you take here, then you're just going to get destroyed on this thing, and like the c5 bishop is hanging. So bishop a3 is best, and after ab3, b takes c6, queen c6, c4, e4, making use of the spin still. fe4, rook d8, queen c3, bishop g4, rook d1, bishop h5, rook hf1, bishop g6, rook f4, rook takes a3 is a very, very nice move. b8, queen d6 with the fork. Rook f2, queen takes a3, rook b2, knight e4 is a very nice move, because if bishop takes e4, then there's bishop e4, and you cannot take on e4 again because of queen a1, and then the queen is going to be lost with mate to come. And if rook takes e4, then queen a1 is a very important move to include to force bishop e1 here, because if the king moves up, then you can just take on e4 here, winning. And after queen e1, bishop e1, bishop e4, rook takes b3, there's this very, very nice move, queen e8. And surprisingly, even though we're equal material at the end of the day, white's king is just so naked in the position, and this is actually winning. It's it's quite a difficult line to find, to be honest, this b5 move, but essentially that line is winning for black. And instead of that, there's this bishop b5 move recommended by the computer. But after de4 and queen e3, ef3, gf3, rook takes d1, bishop f5, rook d6, h6, knight d2, heading to c4 there. So we play e4. After bishop c6, bc6, and fe4, knight e4, queen e4, bishop e4, bishop d4, and h5. White is the one that needs to prove something like the compensation in this position, because black is up a pawn in this here. But note that the engine evaluation says that this is equal, so don't be afraid of that. So yeah, that covers this line, I think, with knight 5 d4 and this bishop e3, this old recommendation. Let's cover this queen e1 move. This is the old idea of Hübner, of Robert Hübner, right? Yeah, that's only became popular in this millennium. That's at least what I, the notes that I took down. So white's queen just escapes through the, it just escapes from the black's rook influence on the d file here, and can meet the advanced d5 with e5. So that's the idea. And so we cannot play d5 here. We have to play a6 to kick the knight back. And again, there are a few moves. Bishop e3 is possible, but this one is quite short. We can just play queen d8, nice square for the queen. Knight 5 d4, takes, e5, bishop c3, d5. And again, we get the typical counterplay with bishop e5, d4, bishop takes, rook takes d7, bishop takes d7, fe4, and a5 here is very interesting. Played by Jerome Pickett against Robert Hübner. After king b1, a4, knight c1, and bishop e6 is a possible improvement here. a3 was played in the game, but yeah, even the computer says something like queen b6 now seems to be very good, but for all intents and purposes, bishop e6 is provides enough compensation for black. So that one is enough. So after knight 5 d4, I think best is just to take on d4 here. After knight takes d4, we play rook d8, and this restores some harmony in the position. This was recommended by, again, FIDE master Amro Aljabrich, and I believe in this suggestion. I've analyzed other moves like queen c7 here, or instead of knight d4, there's rook d8 here. But I just, you can check the annotations in the BGN file below again, but I just think that knight d4 is best. It's also simpler. We play rook d8, restoring some harmony. After h4, we can play e5 here, gaining space and try to prepare bishop e6. So remember, don't be afraid to play this e5 move. And after knight f5, bishop takes f5, ef5, and rook ac8. White has the bishop here, but black has the open c file to work with, and dynamically it's just equal here. So that is what can happen. After queen e1. Yeah. Knight b5 here and the queen e1. So I believe that covers everything in this knight b3 move, right? Knight b3 move. So the last variation of this entire video that I want to talk about is f3. I'm so happy to reach this position. So this has the idea of the English attack, and this is yeah, okay, we can just take on d4 here, I think. Other moves like a6 here are interesting. You can definitely research yourself. Bishop b7 also interesting. After h4, queen a5, knight b3, queen b6, h5. Yeah, okay. There's this bullet game between Magnus and Alariza played in 2021, and white was just better here. Okay, I mean, it's a bullet game, but still, you can just see that this is better for white. This d5 move reaches a very complicated position after ed5, knight d5. If knight c6 happens, bc6, bishop e7, queen e7, knight e4, then we can play f5, knight f2, and the c5 here. Opening possible the bishop here, I mean, like bishop e7, and yeah, the c5 move is like, we just don't want the pawn to c6 there. So like, let's say bishop c4, knight b6, and if bishop b5 happens, then we can play bishop e7, rook h1, and play possibly like bishop d5 in this position, I would say. Looks fine there. I don't see anything wrong with it, but queen d6 I can analyze here, after which queen d6, rook takes d6, bishop d5, knight d3, king f7, c4, king e7, rook takes b6, a b6, c5, rook takes a2, king c2, rook a5, bishop c4, b5, and there are a bunch of moves that I've analyzed in this position. If b4 happens, then bc4, d6, trying to get back the pawn in a better way. D6 takes, b takes a5, c takes d3, king d3, and then king d5 here. And this is the this reaches an equal in game. We can just follow this line, which reaches a very equal in game. I've analyzed this position. I don't know why I would. It doesn't seem very practical, I know, but I've spent some time in the past few months researching this. And after knight e5, which is possible, threaten knight c6. Yeah, something like king d6 seems to be fine for black. So rook e1, bc4, rook takes c6, king d8, knight e5, rook a1, rook b6, rook e1, f4, king c7, knight takes c4, rook d8, d6, king d7, rook b7, king c6, rook takes b7, rook e4, king c3, rook takes f4, rook h7, rook e4, b3, and this is a tough position to play for black, to be very honest. I think white is the only one that can push for a win here. So that's just some of the analysis I want to share that I've discovered here after bishop b5. There's also obviously bishop e2, but yeah, I didn't go into this. Yeah, this is definitely playable. I mean, after knight c6, but there's also this move bishop e7, knight c7, and then bishop c4. Because if knight d5, then after knight d5, bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b3, a5. Get our typical counterplay here. Let's say a3, bishop d7, rook h1, queen c7, f4, a4, bishop a2, knight c4, queen f2, and then b5 here. We get very nice play with possible b4 coming or something like that, b4 and then a3 maybe. Let's say f5 here, which is critical, e5, knight f3, bishop takes f5, bishop takes c4, queen c4, knight e5, queen e6, knight d3, queen h6, and after queen f4 we trade here, bring one of the rooks to c8 and play g6. This is very equal. We try to play rook ab8 next and try to maybe push the pawn forward, and this should be playable. You can check all of these like all of these notes in the PGN, so don't be too worried about it. Just enjoy the all of these fast lightning moves being played. Yeah, so that could happen. But there's also this move bishop c4 before trading on, I mean without trading on on d5 here. After which we can play knight c3, queen c3, knight d5, queen d2, knight b6. Maybe we're just gonna transpose here. But yeah, maybe there's this queen f4 move, which we can try to trade the queens after. Playing this game between Anastasia Bednaruk versus Dmitry Krivakin. After queen e4, a5. We get typical counterplay here, a4, bishop e2, queen c7, rook h1, and rook a5, which is very interesting rook lift. c3, rook h5, h3, rook knight d5. And here I just wrote that after rook d8, we play h6 to secure the king and also secure the h5 rook. So it's not like stranded there alone. And then we can play bishop e8, and the position seems very solid in my opinion. So yeah, that is what can happen after d5. How about knight d4? So this is the main recommendation, I think, to force the white queen onto d4 to prepare a6 b5, which is also an important idea that Sam Shankland mentions in his classical Sicilian course, that you don't want to allow white to play bishop e3, get the perfect coordination, and then take on d4, for example, with the bishop. Because you want the queen on d4 to be able to, because the bishop on e3 actually kind of hinders white's plan of pushing g4, g5, because the bishop is on g5 itself, so it needs to move. So knight d4, queen d4, a6, h4, b5, king b1 is a classic move. There's also this bishop f6 move, but after we take on f6 and queen takes d6, we trade here. Bishop b7, rook d7, bishop c6, rook c7, and bishop e8. There's a lot of competition here with bishop e5 coming, and we can also possibly okay, I mean this is not sorry, apologies for the annotation. It's not harass the queen, it's harass the rook. Yeah, h5 also can possibly fix the pawns, and we have very good competition overall. Yeah, and if king b1, which is the best, which is a classical move in the Sicilian, any Sicilian, we protect, I mean, this obviously just protects the a2 pawn from any possible queen a5 and b4 ideas, and it removes the king from the open c file. So after bishop b7, g4 is possible here, with the idea of like not retreating with the queen to d2, but I want to maybe just talk about the most played move, which is queen d2 here. After this, we can play rook c8, bishop d3, and knight d7, and this is also yeah, this is the idea is just to bring the knight either to e5 or c5, and the bishop on d3 actually just blocks the d file, so there's no pressure on d6 anymore, and so we can continue with this knight d7 plan. After knight d7, let's say bishop e7, queen e7, queen g5, we can play f6 here, queen d2, knight d5, h5, h6, preventing the advance. Rook h1, rook fd8, queen e3, queen c7 here, because in the game queen e8 was played between Manuel Perez and Vladimir Malakov. Malakov, a very strong 2700 GM. And after queen c7, which is an improvement, knight e2, d5. I think this was one of the games, I'm not so sure, but knight e4, rook d6 here, e takes d, bishop takes, bishop e2, queen c5 here. And from this position, I really like black's chances because black has possible knight c4 jumps. If white decides to push c3, then b4 can come to undermine the pawn structure there. So I really like this variation there. But let's cover the possibility if white does not play queen d2. King b1 here, and then white does not play queen d2, because what is the purpose of queen d2? I mean, why not just go for g4, right? But this takes a completely different flavor from the other rousers, because an additional idea in this variation is that if white plays bishop d3, the queen on d4 is like doesn't have any defenders, right? Because it's the bishop on d3 is blocking the d file and blocking the rook. So we can play like rook c8, queen c7, and maybe trade with queen c5 there. If we reach an endgame, we shouldn't be too worried about white's pawn storm, right? So that's a possible idea. So the automatic move is rook c8. And here there are a couple moves. Bishop e3 just prepares g5 immediately, but I think we can gain a lot of counterplay with queen a5 here. And after g5, we can play b4. After knight e2, knight e7, h5, knight e5, already threatening the f3 pawn. Bishop g2, knight c4, threatening this guy. After h6, we can play e5 here, which is very important to close off this queen's diagonal. After queen d3, g6 here, we're actually not afraid because the queen cannot enter the dark squares anytime soon. So after bishop c1 and queen c5, white has no attack now. And note that the queen on d3 is too far away from this f6 or g7 square. So yeah, we're completely winning here with possibly like a5, a4. And a sample line that I've checked with the engine continues after f4, a5, f5, bishop a6, king a1, a4, f6. This is nothing to worry about. We're just going to keep attacking here after bishop d8, bishop h3, rook a8, queen f3, bishop b6, bishop g4, a3, b3, knight e3. And if we trade the pieces off there, then like the weakness on c2, the bishop pair, everything is just going to be in black's favor. So that's what happens after bishop e3, for example. Just note that some of the thematic ideas like e5, closing off the queen's influence, and if you should allow h6 or not. And let's talk about bishop d3 here, which is the only logical place for the bishop. It keeps his attacking chances alive because there's some pressure on h7. And we can play queen c7 here. As I mentioned before, we want to play queen c5 and just threaten the queen exchange. So queen e3 is logical, and after which we can play b4. So now that the queen is not on d4, it does not stop this pawn advance. And knight e2 is possible, but we can just immediately play d5 here. And if e5, then we can play bishop c5, a very important move. After knight e4, knight d7, rook h1, knight takes e5 is a tactic and a half there, with bishop f4, f6, bishop e2, rook c to e8, where black was better in this game. At least in this position, which hasn't deviated. Dejan Pikula versus Mihajlo Zlatic in 2009. And instead of that, queen d2 is possible, after which we can play knight d7 here. Do not take on e5 and blunder your queen with bishop f4. Don't do that. After knight d7, there's f4. We can play a5 here. And black should be better here, slightly objectively. And a sample line that I allowed the engine to think over is after knight g3, queen b6. This is a useful move because it threatens bishop e3 in some positions. It's very annoying. And also this prepares the rook to double up on the c file with rook c7 and bring the other rook to c8. And so I've tried to analyze this knight h5 move. I thought this looks quite dangerous, but we have bishop e3 here, and after queen e2, d4. Now this shows the danger of like I mean the threat of like having the queen on b6 and getting the structure where black is just significantly better. But if rook h3, which is the best move, I think. No, okay. Apparently f5 is the best move, and knight e5 seems to be just winning for black. So yeah, but the engine changes his mind frequently. So I don't know. Let's just talk about rook h3 here because that's what I've analyzed. And here we can play bishop a6, trading off white's strong bishop here. That is the defender of c2. Very common idea if we want to double up on the c file, right? And after knight h5, bishop d3, rook takes d3, rook c7, f5, rook fc8, bishop d8 is the only move that can try to save black's position. Otherwise, the pressure is going to be too immense on the c file. Here, I think I recommend knight takes e5 here. We can take the rook on d8, but the idea is after queen g5 and bishop f8, fe6, fe6, and queen takes d8, knight takes d5, rook d2, knight f7, queen e8, rook e7, queen a4, and knight d6. This is also good for black, so this is definitely possible. But another way to play is just to take on e5 first, and then after queen g5, bishop f8, fe6, fe6, queen e5. We can just take on d8 here. After knight f4, rook c6, and now I don't think we're even like down on exchange. Yeah, and we have rook d to c8 coming, and the classic a5, maybe I mean the a5 e4 push, possibly a3 in the future. And I think this also is a less riskier way to play, although admittedly we do have a weak e6 pawn there. So this bishop d8 move is something that you need to be aware of. And yeah, does that cover everything? Yeah, after bishop c5, queen d2, yeah. So this e5 move is no good. Let's talk about bishop f6 here. So this is why this idea, to take on f6 and then push g5 with the tempo. Bishop f6, g5, bishop e5 is very important. And after f4, if we do something like queen c5, which is recommended by FIDE Master Amro, then rook h3 is kind of like, okay, we can get this position here where it's kind of unclear. So I want to suggest here d takes e4. After bishop takes e4, this very, very strong f5 move. Bishop takes here is no good, I think, because of queen c2 and mate. Yes, I almost missed that. And f takes e5 is no good because bishop takes e4, and we have a fork on c2 as well as the rook on h1. So that's no good. And so g4, g takes f6 is the only move. But after bishop takes f6, this bishop on this diagonal is like really, really beautiful. Let's say after knight d4, rook fe8. Black has enormous activity here. Even though we have a weak e6 pawn, our activity compensated fully with beautiful rooks and beautiful bishops. So that's what can happen after bishop f6. And let's talk about knight e4. So this is the better of the two knight moves. Rook b8 is suggested by Amro, but bishop c6 seems to be the best. There's some things to know after like bishop f6. This is not good because this is unprovoked. Bishop f6, g5, bishop b7. If white plays knight b6, then we can play rook b8, knight c4, and then d5 here. E d5, bishop d5, queen e5, rook b to c8, takes, and there's a fork over here. So knight d2 is forced. After rook d8, black is just better here with the immensely active bishop here. a5 is going to come next move, and if white takes on e6 now, then rook a8 can come with a skewer on the e2 pawn. So that's very important. And if b3 here, then we can just play rook fd8, possibly with some ideas of d5 or even a5. And let's say after knight b2, we play a5, and we have good counterplay here with d5 or e4 coming, depending on the position. Let's say h5, then we can play a4 here. I just don't want to, we don't want to play d5 here because there's e5, and this closes the center, and white's attack is, white's going to gain a lot of time to support their attack here. So we play a4 here. After b takes a4, rook a8, h6, g6, f4, bishop takes a4. This is just a sample line of what could happen, more or less giving an image to what can happen in the position. Bishop c4, bishop c2, king c2, d5, queen d4, bishop f8, queen e5, queen takes, rook ac8, king b3, dc4, knight c4, bishop e7, rook d8, rook g1, bishop c5, rook g2, king f8, and this leads to an equal game, where the engine already recommends to repeat here. And so that's what happens if this bishop takes f6 move. The more critical of the moves is knight b6, and after rook b8, knight c4, bishop b5, attacking this guy. There's bishop f6, and g5 here. And there are two moves here. Bishop e7 is simpler, where we kind of get a race here with a5, a4 here. Meanwhile, white tries to push these pawns. So for example, queen e2, defending the knight, and then like queen e2, a5. Sample line is just f4, a4, here, and here. And rook takes e6 here is a mistake because of queen e1. Don't forget that. And queen e6 here is a mistake because of takes, rook e5. And best here is, white has some serious problems on the back rank here because of this a pawn. So if rook a1 needs to be played, and we take on e6 and play bishop d8, and white has some serious back rank problems here. Let's say after this, b takes a3, b8, king c1, rook f1, king d2, king f7, rook d6, bishop e7, knight e3, rook f2, king e1, rook c2, desperado, rook f6, takes, or king g6. And at the end of the day, should be a draw, but black should be on the better end of this draw, of this drawn endgame. And the best move here is knight e3 after queen e4, just repeating. So that is what white could do. That's just trying to give a brief overview of that line. But there's also this bishop c3 move, which is quite crazy. And you can check the annotations yourself. I think the lines are very complicated here. I haven't analyzed bishop d2 here, but you can a knight d2 here, so you can definitely analyze that yourself. But the other lines I've gone into very into a lot of depth there. So please enjoy that analysis. And yeah, so I think that covers everything except this move, bishop e2. So out of curiosity, I was just wondering, why does white need to play bishop d3? I mean, doesn't this close off the d file? Let me just try to find out what happens if bishop e2. And the problem is that this move is like a nothing move. The bishop had to like kind of have some influence over the position there. Meanwhile, this bishop on e2 is doing nothing. So we can play queen c7 here. And the computer already recommends bishop d3, saying that I must slip. Let me just put the bishop on d3 instead. But let's say white does not want to admit their mistake and plays bishop e3. Then we play d5 here, strike in the center. G5, knight h5. After ed5, knight g3. Rook h1 is a mistake. But other moves like just lose the rook. I mean, the engine already recommends bishop d3 or h5. So yeah, rook h1 is the only way to save the rook. And after knight f5, queen e4 is a mistake here because of b4. And if knight a4, then we can just take on e3 with the c2 pawn hanging. And a bishop f4, the only move. Then queen a5. And white is in some serious trouble here because the d5 pawn is going to be lost. Winning also for black. And let's say bishop f4, which is the best move. Then knight takes d4, bishop c7, knight e2, rook c7, d6, bishop d6, rook d6, bishop takes f3, rook f2, rook c6 here, covering both of these problems. And after rook d7, bishop h5, black is just up a pawn here, so that's very nice. And so this bishop e2 move is just no good. We can remember just play like queen c7 and try to go for like the d5 move if bishop e3 happens. So yeah, I think that covers every single variation. So I'm very happy to reach this position. To reach the end of this video. I'm very tired. It's 1:45 a.m. right now. I apologize for speeding up in many of these parts, especially in the later parts, but hopefully this covers every single thing that you need to know about this variation. If you have any suggestions or if you're more experienced in these lines, then please do comment something below, and please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, share the video if you enjoyed it, and if you think some other Sicilian theoreticians may enjoy it, and I hope to see you soon when I make some more shorter videos that are not 3 hours long or something crazy like that. So thank you so much for watching. I apologize for taking so much of your time. Have a great rest of your day. And everyone, please stay safe and have fun playing chess. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.